It's Friday, October 25th, 2024. Start off as we typically do with our promotional segment, where I tell you that if you'd like to support our show, it's very easy. You could just go to supportourshow.com. If you don't remember that, it will be in the show notes, or if I've somehow mispronounced it, which is very possible. Things always sound clear when you say them. Doesn't necessarily mean they are. So in the show notes, there will be a little support our show link there as well. And the only other show news really is that Lando has a YouTube page up for his audiobook for Chapter 1. Right? It's all of Chapter 1, isn't it?
Yeah, it's all of Chapter 1. It's all of Chapter 1 now, yes.
Yep, so we'll link to that as well. And you can go and listen there and hear Lando narrate his book with a nicely updated cover, which I have to say I'm happy with far more than the previous one. So
well, the previous one's still up too on Amazon. I have to go in there.
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay. But, people can look and gasp. It was traditional media, so I could not revise the way I can now. Believe me, the time lapse of this drawing is up, and you will see that it changes quite a bit in ways that in traditional media would not have been possible without starting over.
No, and that is one of the things that I have to get used to when talking to you about these things. Is that traditionally you draw something and you'd be like, well, that's what it is. Whereas now it's like, depending on how many layers you do it in, you can change it, take whole things out.
Yes,
it's pretty amazing
easily.
What you can do.
Very, very, very easily. That's why working in layers is because when they went from the whatever rev of the iPad was before the M series, they when it went to the next one, the M1. That was the reason I upgraded, really, was because it doubled the layer count, just about. And that is hugely beneficial when, the one that I did for you. Actually, where's my app? Hold on. Let's see. I still have it on the iPad here. Let's see. How many layers did this end up being? Because this is just an idea of what you can do here, as opposed to... Now, of course, on the computer, it was always possible to have hundreds of layers because you were dealing with a much different platform. But it was also a lot harder to draw on one unless you had a Wacom Pen or something like that. So the image I did for your book, the new cover, is layers. Layer count, 122.
Wow.
So that's 122 individual layers comprise that image.
Interesting.
I didn't
think it was that.
Oh, no, because the way that I do these things, and this is just, I don't know if everybody does it this way. This is the way I do it. Like I said, the time lapse will show you everything. Every layer being created, it's sped up, obviously. You can slow it down. Is every time I do lines of any kind, it gets its own layer in case I have to change it. So when you said, I want the arm to be robotic instead of have the sleeve, it was very easy to at least, I had to duplicate the layer of clothes because that was its own layer. Then erase just the sleeve, leaving the shirt. Then I could redraw the arm. And every third muscle in that arm had its own layer. The way I do layers is no lines can intersect. That's a layer. That way, if I have to refine something, I can erase just that one line and it doesn't destroy the rest. So it's I have a very specific method of working in that way. So yeah, that's a 122 layer thing. Would not have been possible on the original iPad. That would have been about half the layers. So I would have had to start collapsing things, which meant that potentially when you said, can we change the sleeve, it might have been a much bigger deal. This way, not so big a deal.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's something I have to get used to because like I still think of it in the traditional way. But the fact that you can do that, it's revision. You basically have the power of revision that I have with, a word processor over a typewriter.
Yes, exactly. The benefit of the word processor and why you could do it so much sooner than those of us in the visual arts is words take up very little space. So saving an entire book, what is a book in terms of megabytes? Is it even megabytes to save a book?
Oh, it's tiny. Hold on, I can tell you.
Right. Yeah.
If you give me 1 second, I'll tell you how big it is because it's. Let's see.
Yeah, but I imagine it's not even megabytes. It's probably less than a megabyte, maybe 2, 3.
So, Break World, which is the longer book.
How many pages?
Hold on, I'm going to tell you.
Roughly. You don't have to give it exact.
Is that less than a meg?
It probably is.
I think it's less than a meg. Well, I do these in docs because I hate Word now. And
sure.
You know what? The PDF that's with the cover is 1.3 megabytes.
Yeah, okay, and PDFs are going to be inherently bigger. But
the doc
inflated.
is less than a megabyte.
Yeah, I'm sure. That's what I'm saying. So word processors had a massive advantage because text is inherently smaller in terms of saving. Yeah. So you could literally save every time you finished one of your, let's say you wrote on a Monday. You could say, Break World, Monday revision. And you could just do that and do that and do that. And it really wouldn't take up any space on even a tablet. Even an early tablet wouldn't have been a problem because you could put it on a Kindle and it would have been fine. Whereas to try to do because that's like 9 by, I don't remember what the inches are, whatever the size of that. It's a paperback size.
Yeah.
That's, as you can see, that's 122 layers.
Yeah.
And I don't even know what the space of that image. That's just the layers. The actual size of the image. Well, here's the flattened image. So this is without all the layers. It's a megabyte for the flattened image. That's where it's compressed down to one layer. So imagine that. So it's got to be at least, it's probably roughly 100 megs or so, depending on the PSD file, something like that.
I mean, listen, and this audiobook project has been a learning experience for me because the size of some of these files that then get compressed down so that you can upload them. Like, they go from being, 60 gigs to being like 12 or something like that, or it was less than that.
The Premiere export was 60 gigs, which, to be fair, Premiere bloats everything.
Yeah. So, it's very strange.
Anything
the whole process is strange to me.
Everything, this is all news to you. But basically what happens is you export the process of it, for those who care, maybe nobody does, is I did this very short, how long is it, 50 minutes? Is it even that long? How long is the total file?
The whole thing is 50-something minutes.
Okay, so 50-some-odd minutes. Lando went and found a background, kind of a looped animation. So we just took that. So really in Premiere, it is maybe 6 total layers because the looped animation is its own layer. And I have to repeat that and then reverse it so that it smoothly goes back and forth. So that's just, if you were actually look at it, it's just a bunch of chopped up little 20-second bits after over and over. I almost did a stream of it, but it ended up being so quick for me to do. It wasn't worth streaming. It wouldn't have taken an hour. It took like 20 minutes. So that's one layer of just the repeating animations. Then the second layer is the book itself, just an image of it. Third layer and fourth layer are the text that appears on the screen. And then the fifth layer would be the audio. Yeah, so 5 layers, really. And when that exported as a 4K video file, that was 60 gigs. So then I put it through Handbrake, which is a compression tool. And that knocked it down to, I want to say 1 or 2 gigs. I don't remember what the file size I sent was, but it was under 2 gigs. I know that. And then if you were to pull it down from YouTube, and this is probably something you did not do, but if you were to pull it down from YouTube, it's crushed even further because YouTube annihilates video quality. That's just a known thing. So even that file that I sent you, if you were to send that 60 gig file up, it would probably come back as 4 or 5 because they just destroy the quality of any video file that's put on there. It's one of the ironies of YouTube being as dominant as it is. It's actually horrific in terms of the quality of what you get out of it. So yeah, that file got squished and squished and squished.
Well, I mean,
but yes, this is all news to you.
It is. It's also strange.
Yeah.
Not to mention the fact, like, outside of the stuff you did, just the act of trying to get myself to be able to read this shit and not fuck it up.
Yeah.
like whatever you hear, if you decide to hear it, whatever you hear is me having read the same section probably 3 to 4 times, and getting to a point where I was like, this is as good as it's gonna get. Because, I mean, also, I have to warn you, this is my freshman novel. This was written like a decade ago. So it's not going to be as
smooth.
It's not as smooth or as clever as this kind of the stuff I'm writing now. Because now I'm looking at it, and even by compared to my second book, you get better. You just get better every time. And I didn't realize that until I really started like reading it, in a detailed fashion. And being like, oh yeah, it's like I have evolved past this point. Like there's a lot more, there's a lot more heavy conceptual shit going on now in the background. Where I used to not play with that quite so much. I was more focused. In the beginning, it's like making a movie. In the beginning, you're just amazed that you can get people talking on screen. But then, as you keep making movies, you're like, oh, subtext and symbolism, and there's all this other weird shit. So it's a fairly straightforward, like. I feel like it's a very golden age sci-fi book, right? That's what it feels like to me. And I almost debated not starting with it. I almost debated starting my second book, but hopefully by the time I get to that, I'll be better at this. The wacky thing is that I'm writing right now, and like I'm at that point now where I'm starting to do weird shit that even is weird to me. I don't know if you've. It's one of the weird things from writing is when characters go places that you didn't expect to go, and you're in the act of writing it, and as you're writing it, you're like, what is going on here? And like, you're writing it, but there's this very organic feel to where it's going, which is not what you necessarily planned. And like I had a moment like that recently where a character in my book, the story went in a wildly different direction than the direction I had planned for it. But as I was writing it, it just made sense, and it almost felt like the character was making his own decision, which I know is a very weird, almost like schizophrenic thing to say, but it's something that does happen, especially when you spend a lot of time with a character. This doesn't happen in the first 100 pages. This is something that starts happening when you're in like the 200 page mark, 300 page mark, where suddenly you're like, these characters well enough now that there's almost like a subconscious thing going on as you're writing them. So that's a weird effect that I did not necessarily get in the first book I wrote. I got it in the second one, but I didn't get it in third. I'm getting it now a lot in the third one. So it's you evolve, you get better. Hopefully, people who listen to this audiobook will find it soothing. I've been told I have a good ASMR. What is it? What's that ASMR?
Yeah, ASMR. That's it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
ASMR.
I have a mellow tone apparently. That's what I'm told. So, but I expect nothing to come of it because that's what I have learned to expect from art. Right after we uploaded that file, virtually within the hour I got that uploaded, I read an article about the state of essentially like authorship in the world, like how much writers get paid, what the market looks like for writers. Do you know what the mean payment for authors is?
Okay, now is that meaning per book, per year? What are we talking
about?
No.
Yearly, annually. How much the
for
mean
an author?
Payment per author?
Well,
per year.
I would guess between 30 and 60,000 a year.
7.
There you go.
$7,000.
Well, okay, wait a minute though. Is that counting first-time authors and then Stephen King, and you're averaging
Yes.
those
Yeah.
two?
That's counting everybody. That's counting first-time authors and Stephen King.
But I mean, does that count self-publishing now too?
I think it's anybody. From what I read, this was basically anybody who's being paid for their writing, and who declares it, I suppose. And the whole thing is that writing. We're in a weird time right now for writing.
Yeah, I'll tell you what my problem with that is. I don't think you should be counting because literally I could self-publish a book
I know,
and
but
sell it
what
for
they
a
were
nickel
trying to
because
get
I don't
at,
care about. You know what I
yes,
mean?
but what they're trying to get at is the fact that you cannot live off of it anymore. That
Well,
there is a large population of people, and that's why the fact that you include Stephen King and people like Stephen King, right? And it's still $7,000 a year. It says to you
well,
that there's a lot of people who are, can barely survive, and that's what they're trying to say is that.
I don't know if I believe that that's really true though, because
Well, that's what's being reported. That's what the numbers look
well,
like.
all right. Let's take it a beat back here. What's being reported doesn't mean anything to me. What matters to me is the methodology. And the thing is that when 20 years ago, don't get me wrong, I certainly believe that writers, like any creatives, have a hard time of surviving.
I've spent a lot of time around writers, far more than you, and professional
Yeah.
writers, right?
Sure.
And I can tell you that of the professional writers I've met, right?
Yeah.
Only the public speakers that we like in this particular course that I was in, like Orson Scott Card. Orson Scott Card is probably the only writer I've met who lives off his writing.
Okay. All I was getting at was I'm certainly not making an argument that writers generally can live off their art. I don't think most artists can live off their art.
No, and that's the thing is I was getting to that, which is the fact that most artists, like you said, like painters, illustrators, there's a lot of people that they call it. I think the phrase I was reading was hobby pay. It's people, you can't live off this because it's hobby pay. You know what I mean? It's like, everyone's got a day job because you can't. I mean, it's like actors, right? How many actors never get big roles? They're like, they're the cameraman number 3 in a movie. You know what I mean? Like or cop number 14, right? And they have a day job, and the joke is that usually they work as waiters, right? And then they get occasionally, and it's
but what I would
it's like that.
Curious about is if they segmented that into authors who were actually making a serious effort at writing. And the only reason I say that is, like I said, well, it is, but I mean, okay.
Well,
it is.
Would you label me as an author who makes a serious effort?
Well, I would now. Yeah, because you're putting together, audiobooks and you've got a public face, where before I would have said, no, you were running as a hobby because you didn't do any marketing.
I gave up. That's
yourself.
why. Yeah.
Well, okay, right. As I did the same thing. I for a long time said, no, the only thing I'm doing that's creative is the podcast because I'm a failed artist, right?
Yeah.
I didn't do any marketing or anything like that.
You know what? I've never known the terminology for myself, but actually now that you've said that, that makes perfect sense. I am a failed author. I will wear that badge with courage.
Although even that term now I don't know that I would even use that for anybody anymore, because the difference between when you and I were in college or before that to now is that accidental discovery is a powerful thing. And so
you know what?
Failure has a different shelf life than it used to.
It's really weird. Like, it's really weird the world we live in and the arts they're in, because like my someone I know has a daughter who is a very good singer. I would say that she sounds like an American Adele. Now, you know how normally when someone says, "Oh, my daughter's a really good singer," and you're like, "Yeah, sure they are," right? Because that's usually what happens, right? This girl is genuinely a remarkable singer. I've heard her sing a bunch of times, and every time I've been like, "Wow, you sound like Adele." And the thing is that you always get these. Every now and then you encounter some kind of art in your life, which is like truly amazing, and you sit there and go, "Wow, like, where do you go with this? This person isn't doing anything with this right now," and they were kind of like on the fence what they wanted to do, and then all of a sudden they got a call from a friend that was like, "Hey, American Idol is doing tryouts," and they sent a video to American Idol, and now they've like gotten through several stages of the interview process, where like they, you make a tape, and then you make another tape, and then you keep going up until and last I heard, they are like one step away from getting on TV, like the initial TV, because you know how in the beginning they have like Like I think it was. I have never really watched American Idol. Just from what
Oh,
I read,
I know that there are rounds of tryouts, and then
yes,
you get to
but
the
this is
actual,
the first
thing.
round of televised.
Yeah, it's like
tryouts.
Jeopardy. You don't just get on
Yes.
Jeopardy. You have to do several rounds where you have to beat other people. So it's
exactly.
And
so
they
this
also
is the first
they basically
televised one.
They don't want anybody in the middle. You either have to be a train wreck or a genuine talent, and that's
Oh,
the way
yeah,
getting
yeah,
on.
yeah.
If you're boring, they don't want you. So they either want people
Yeah.
to be going, "Oh my God, how terrible," or "Oh my God, how great." But
Yeah,
that's
so-
another.
so-
There again, you point out that whole thing with American Idol. There are as many people who didn't make it on there that then found minor careers because they got some type of publicity.
Listen,
so that's what I
the
mean.
joke
about
is that-
failure is different now. It's not the same.
The joke of American Idol is I've always found that people who came in second in American Idol usually have better careers.
Right. That's the joke.
Yeah, it's really weird.
Is that, the people who win disappear in a year, and their other people seem to get careers.
Yeah, and it's so we live in a very strange time of the arts. Now here's the thing. I know that authors have always been shit on. I know that painters have always been shit on. Artists have always been shit on.
Yes.
It's just depressing. I think the timing was depressing for me because I had just put out the audiobook thing and I was like, yay! And then I read this article and I was like, fuck. And I am a failed author. Yes, that is what you would label me.
But
I don't need author money to live. That's where I'm lucky. Because other people, like I was reading how you have these people who are, and this article I was reading, which I saw in the Guardian, so maybe I'll just link it to you. They talked to several published authors, and the one guy they spoke to had written 3 books. His first book, right, was a big hit. He was like this new author award, and like all this shit was going on, and he was like, oh, this is just the way it is, right? And then he wrote his second book, and there was less clout, and then he wrote his third book, and then there was he found out that I guess certain publishers weren't even going to bother carrying it in trade bookstores. Like they were just not going to bother. And he was like, holy shit. And he made so much less money that he was like, okay, well, I guess I'm not leaving he works in academia. He's like, I guess I'm not leaving my job in academia. And that's the thing is that, remember Cameron Hurley famously wrote this thing on her blog that was like, hey, I'm never leaving my day job. And it was and everyone was like, but you've written you at that point I think she'd written 6 books or something like that. I know she'd written the whole God's War trilogy at that point. So maybe she had some short stories in the God's War. But she said essentially, I have royalties and money comes in. She's like, but I'm not rolling in it and by any stretch. She goes I'm not leaving my day job. I need my day job. She's like, this is an extra bonus, and that's what you start to realize about a lot of these people is that very few people in the arts get to live off the arts. There's very few people who are skilled and or lucky enough. And I'm going to put the lucky in there. I didn't used to, but I'm going to put the lucky in there.
Oh, it's luck. Luck.
Because there's plenty of people who get weirdly discovered or have a friend or, fucking hell. When I lived in Vermont, I knew a woman who was, she was published 3 or 4 times over. And I was always like, wow. And then I read one of her books, and she was let's be very clear, she was a very nice lady. I liked her. She, there's no negativity towards her and stuff. She was great, but she was writing on the side. She had a day job that had nothing to do with the arts whatsoever, right? And I read one of her books at one point, and I was like, wow. I was like, this is really boring. Like it was very slice of life,
Well, 50 Shades of Grey famously is not a particularly well-written book, and yet...
Oh, no. It's not that. It's not that it was poorly written. It was just kind of boring.
I think technically, but what I'm saying is it wasn't a wildly engaging book, and yet it hit an audience. That happens.
Well, then I found out that this person's sister was in publishing. This person's parents were in publishing. This person's brother was in publishing. And it was one of those things where oh, yeah, of course you got this published. Not only do you have family in publishing, but you have family in trade publishing. In the specific publishing that would publish this. You already had an in. You just had to be able to write something that was, well written. And it is well written. It was just boring. And it's that kind of thing. It's that's an in. That's lucky. And there's people who are, and there are people who are genuinely skilled who are unlucky. I cry for the great writers we'll never hear from. and not to mention doing this course, because I'm still doing that course on like the it's essentially the history of science fiction in the United States. That's what it is. I'm learning all this shit about, how people became famous, when they became famous, like what they were known for, and like what happened in the industries when they were, writing. And it's like, yeah, there's so much that seems so just like dumb luck sometimes. Like, yes, you have to have the skill, but the skill's not enough. It's the whole, I always go back to Andy Warhol, where it's like, listen, Andy Warhol is no amazing artist, but the man knew how to sell himself. And that was really his skill. His skill was,
and that's the thing I would be curious about is, of these people surveyed, how many are actually trying to not even be successful authors, but bothering.
How many are reckless? How many are reckless?
Yeah, because
like me?
If you self-publish a book because you want your family to buy it, I'm sorry, you can't be included. That you're not really trying to be.
No!
If you're,
and that woman that I was talking about, she was published and she had like a minor following.
Right, but I'm saying this thing where they said 7,000. I'm not saying that it's going to be much more than that, but did that actually include authors who weren't charging a nickel for a book because they wrote a kid's book for their nieces? Which is nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying there is.
That's fine.
But that shouldn't be counted. So I'd be curious what the methodology is. By no means do I expect them to find that it's going to be,
no,
$1 million every author. No, it's going to be nothing.
Even if you get the largest possible population of writers in there, I think it's not going to be much more than that.
It would be interesting.
And you know what? Listen, I think that goes for illustrators and painters and chefs, and I mean, like,
sure.
I think that in general across the arts, you're going to get this.
Yeah,
because the arts, this is the thing about AI, where we were talking about how, like, AI is basically the attempt of corporations and rich people to bypass having to pay and respect skilled artisans.
Sure.
Yeah, if we could just get AI to do it, why do we need you? And it's like, and there's already companies out there that have scrapped the people who used to write the back cover copy, just having AIs do it. And like, sure. So it's, if they could if a publisher can get rid of the writer and go straight to the book, right? Then, that works for them. And they've got the product, they control it. I mean, the only thing they don't have is they can't really send the author on a press tour at that point. Because I do think, and this is the other part of it, is that I do think that there are certain people, this is the whole, like, being able to sell yourself. I think there are certain artists who create a certain mystique about themselves that become almost as important as the art that they themselves are creating, or sometimes more so. Like Hemingway. Listen, I'm very on the fence about Hemingway. There's some shit of his that's very clever, and there's some shit of his that I'm like, oh my god, you're killing me here, man. But then there's this whole other aspect of Hemingway that appeals to, like, men, where they're like, oh god, he was such a manly man, look at him, he was hunting and he hated women and he went fishing and he drank a lot and he killed himself. It's like, oh god, he's so sexy, and you're like, that's that's the mystique of Hemingway, which mostly affects men, I might add, by the way. I don't see a lot of I don't often see women who are like, oh my god, Hemingway is just so romantic. You're like, no. So I think that sometimes you have that where the author becomes more of the story than the stories he writes. Exactly. Which is So, but yes, I that article came out. I read that right after I put the stuff online, and I was like, this is the universe stepping in, going, hey man, don't expect a party. And that really, I mean, that's an important life lesson for the arts, by the way. If you love art, but you're expecting a party, go be a plumber. Sorry. If you do arts because you like doing it, because you're compelled, because you're some kind of crazy, which is kind of how I think of myself, then keep going. But if you think there's going to be a party, if you think you're going to be vindicated, like, no.
Well, okay. I'm going to say this.
Yeah.
It depends on what your vindication is. If that's monetary, then you're going to probably be disappointed. If it is finding people who appreciate what you do, you may very well make it without ever making a dime.
I think that's still hit or miss. And you know what? I think that's based on what your art form is. No, I think that's based on what your art form is. Because there is a hierarchy of art that gets appreciated and then art that people don't give a shit about because it takes much work.
Wait. Okay, let's say 6 months from now.
Yes.
you get nothing back except for
Yes.
one note, email, review, whatever, that says
It's like,
this is
your
a
book
great
fucking
book.
sucks. Yeah.
No. A positive one that says, you know what? I was at a really low point. I read this book. It was great. It was exactly what I was looking for, and I loved it, every minute of it. Thank you very much for writing this. And you never get anything else. You're telling me that's not worth something?
Oh no, it's definitely it's
well.
it's
That's
good
so. That's what I'm saying
and
is.
And this is the thing. I said to you, I think on a previous show, that I still write, and I still write because in my head, writing is kind of what saved me in my youth, and I like the idea of connection, right? But I already kind of got to this headspace where, like, in college, because Joe and I were in college together, right?
Mm.
If you're a painter, if you're an illustrator, you can show someone your picture, and they can look at it, and they can go, "Oh, that's really good," or
Sure.
fuck off, right? Instant. If you're a ceramicist,
Yeah.
I made this thing, I made this statue. Look at this. Oh, and they can go, "Ooh, yeah, that's nice." If you're a chef, you can bake some sort of cool art cake, and they can try it, and they can go, "This is beautiful, and it tastes fantastic," right? Photographer's the same thing, right? Photographers, honestly, being a photographer is like that was really, if you're looking to go to art school and get a lot of attention, and you can sell yourself, photographer's the way to go. Because I mean, we had some friends that were photographers, and like, especially in the female department, it's a very easy sale. Just be like, "Oh, look at my photos,"
Sure.
right? But as a writer, my God, that's the worst fucking profession you can pick. Hey, check out my book. Like,
Well,
no one wants to read
what
your book in art school.
what you have to do is give them the perfect paragraph or the perfect sentence. That's the trick.
Okay,
It's
first
different.
off, the perfect paragraph does not exist. Second of
Well,
all,
I'm not
nobody's
saying, I'm not
impressed
saying
with
literally perfect, but
nobody's
there are
impressed
many,
with a perfect sentence.
Oh, I disagree. There are many lists that I've seen where people are like, write the great 2-sentence opening to a book, and people come up with great stuff. And that's very famously how things are pitched, is you give them a couple of sentences and you hook them whether it's going to be that or not. So I'm not saying it isn't more difficult because you have to make people read. So
Well, that's
there
what
is
I'm
a bit
saying.
of a,
That's the other part of it, is that
there is that.
when you start
It is
dealing,
tougher.
when you are writing, first off, people have to read. So that's a big problem right there, right? They have to be able to read first, right? Plus, I think that sometimes you can get too clever for your audience. Where, like, if you have a
that's definitely
vocabulary
true.
that's like way beyond your readers, and you're using all these
Oh.
crazy words, right? They have no idea what the hell you're talking about.
I showed somebody that I'll keep very vague because I don't want anybody to be insulted.
Oh,
but
yeah,
I
don't
showed
get yourself in
somebody
trouble.
a Jeff Darrow image, and they said, "I can't look at this. It's giving me a headache. There's too much going on in it."
Yeah.
And that was the instant response. So even
And
though
you're
I'm
like,
sitting
"Oh, well,
going,
here, let
"Yeah,
me
but
show
look
you
at how
some
much is going
Katsuhiro-
on in here."
Yeah.
You know,
Let me
look
show
at
you
this.
some Katsuhiro Otomo black and white images.
Well, no, Jeff Darrow is
I put those two together.
probably. Oh no! If you were to look at the difference, don't get me wrong.
Oh no,
Otomo
There's a
can
difference,
do that detail,
but
but he doesn't always do that.
no,
detail.
I know Jeff Darrow does in every panel.
Jeff
he goes out
Darrow
of his
seems to
way,
be on a
but,
mission to fill as much of the frame as possible with as many small, like 0.05 pen marks as possible.
Man.
All
I
with
wonder- I mean, he
decision
must-
and intent. Don't get me wrong, but Jesus.
I can't imagine how big his rough drafts are. Like how big, like how large he must work.
Oh, I
with.
have
Or is
his
he doing it
book.
with
I mean, it's like that.
or
It's
is he
with-
working
it's
with like a
small-scale
microscope?
pencil.
You know.
Well,
What's
he
that?
might be now. I don't think early on he was. I think early on what he would do is just put his face right up to the paper. But now I think he is using
A magnifying glass.
one of those, those big ones like you had in Science Lab, the
Yeah.
big round thing that you had to write on. You know?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, it's not great. So
Well,
I try to.
Creative arts are tough because they
Yeah,
don't
and
have
they're
a
so-
rational logic the way most other jobs do.
Yeah,
You
and
know,
they're
if
so
you're a
important
mechanic-
to society. Like
Yeah,
that's the other
but
weird
like
part
if you're
about
a
it is that
plumber, it's easy
You
to
know
figure
what you
out
do, yeah.
if you're going to be able to make it or not. Okay, here's a
Yeah.
plumbing problem. Can you fix this toilet? Yes, I fixed it.
Yeah.
Okay, you're hired. Like that's
Can
it.
you fix my
you
car.
just have to be able to
if
do
you're a
it.
mechanic, fix my car. Fix my car. Yeah.
To a large degree, don't
Yeah.
get me wrong. There's more to it than simple that, but you can demonstrate
Oh,
a
no,
set of
but-
skills and practice it, and it's done.
But you get the skills and you improve over time, and you have a
Yes.
a specific practice.
Right.
A plumber fixes plumbing. Mechanic fixes engines and whatnot. You could be and you can be almost an artist of that area. Like there are plumbers
it's
who
artistry.
are
It's
astoundingly good, right? But I mean,
Yes.
There's also a
But
lot of basic plumbers who still get paid because they fixed your toilet.
Well, it's a repeatable artistry because there's a fundamental set there that you will understand. Whereas in art, you don't have to know anatomy to be a good artist. I mean, you know.
No.
If
you somehow cultivate a style that is all your own and it appeals to people, then no.
Well, or, you know, I say this, and I'm not fishing for compliments. This is just the honesty. When I got to do the Magic cards, I looked at the other Magic artists, and there are people there of such a caliber beyond me that because people said, oh, you haven't done any more. I'm like, I'm grateful I did any. Look at what these people are doing. These are people who paint stuff that would be illustrating Lord of the Rings type books.
I'm going to defend you here from yourself because you often defend me for myself, so I'll go the other way. A lot of those people were doing very like Boris Vallejo, like very realistic looking photos, right? Images. And when they were asked, from what it appears to me, when they were asked to do stained glass, they really just tried to put like panels over their Boris Vallejo art, right? Whereas opposed to you, that when you did a stained glass approach, you literally took each panel as its own piece of the larger image. Like you could take your image and break it apart into all the little bits, and you would realize it was all just a bunch of shapes. Like, whereas with a lot of these other
if people
ones
were painting on wide canvases that are easily resized, it's clearly going to be easier to do it. But what I mean by that is, art can be successful for people at any time, and that's what's different about now than before. Is that, ironically. By the way, I have one thing I want to ask you about your YouTube channel before we get out of this. But there is an irony in that it is very possible that you could find success through people liking how you read your books more than the books themselves, and you could start making money from that.
And wouldn't that just be awful? That would be like insult to injury, wouldn't it?
No. Look, I look at it from the opposite side. And I'm like, who cares why they connect? They do.
Here, I read that article. And it reiterated to me, like I said, it was the universe stepping in and going, don't expect a party. And I sat there and I thought to myself, you know what? I was like, I think I need to find something in life different, something that's not writing. That I
let me ask you this question. Would you be disappointed if people... Because there have been instances of this happening where nobody wanted to read the book in its text form, but when they heard the author narrating it, then they wanted to hear it. And so they were, because, audiobooks are reading,
Listen, that gets into the storyteller aspect, though. There's people who are
good storytellers. But isn't that kind of better?
It'd be interesting.
You managed to take your stuff and transform it into a better multimedia version of itself? That's kind of a neat upgrade, really.
It would be interesting.
Yeah, because it would still be your words, but it would be imbued with the meaning.
Listen, it's just not my bag. It's not what I signed up for.
Well,
it's not what I fell in love with. But here's the thing. Life is about adapting. So at the end of the day, you know what? You do whatever you're going to do. And if you find but like the thing is, this whole audiobook format thing, I find it to be massively stressful. I don't enjoy it. It actually like really irks me through the day. And trying to do the audiobooks, I mean, that's like fucking putting I almost said needle through a thread. So it's like threading a needle. Because I have to find time in my day where no one is just suddenly going to walk into my office. Right? Or try to suddenly get in. So like there's a few recordings that were ruined because I had a child basically come at my door thinking it was open and then hit the lock, and all you could hear in the recording was suddenly like bum 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 bum. Like, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Or I went to record and all of a sudden there was a man hanging at my window, and my wife texted me, was like, "Hey, the gutter cleaners are here." And I was like, "Shit." And that was it. I couldn't do anything for the next hour. They were on the roof with like a leaf blower, like right by my window, and I was like, "Well, there goes that span." Trying to find time to do this when like there's a lot of other stuff going on. Yeah, I find the whole thing very stressful. Whereas when I write, I'm fucking gone. I sit down, I start typing, and like like I said, I can't write standing because I lose track of my body and I'll fall over. And like I'm not, like, I say that and people don't believe me. I will literally fall over. I am leaving my body. I am having an astral experience going into some other dimension. And that's what it feels like.
Worry, you'll be able to, in like the next 3 years, you'll be able to buy a little personal AI narrator and train it on your voice, and then just feed your text into it, and then it's done. See?
It's weird. Yeah. Well,
I wouldn't do
it. And
you know what?
I think the other thing too is you hear the inflection that authors intended. Because that's the other thing is that when when you read it, it's like reading a text sometimes. You lose some of the inflection, and the author has to try to communicate you the inflection. And sometimes you get the inflection from them, and that can kind of add to it. But no, I just realized, I need to do something other than writing. I got to find some other outlet. If I
almost said, send me one of the chapters that you haven't recorded yet, and you and I should read it and see how we read it differently. Because I haven't read that book since it came out either, so I don't have much of a memory of it. So it would almost be me reading it, but I would do it just to hear the difference, and I would do it seriously. I would try to actually read it.
Listen. I don't think you'd be doing it silly. It's hard to do it silly. Like you start reading it, and the thing is, as you're reading it, you start to you do actually start to read it. You know what I mean? Like you're in it.
Oh yeah. Oh, you could do it silly. You could do it silly.
I'm sure. Actually,
I can start doing accents for all the characters. Just
I just lower the I go deeper or higher depending on but within a certain range. The only character that I find myself reading, that I actually do find myself reading with sort of a certain amount of joy, is there is a character named Max, who is this android who thinks that he is the hottest shit in the world. And I just have a fun time reading his lines because,
by the way,
there's such
I was going to say, if you ever need to roboticize a voice or anything, we can do that too. If you ever want to put an effect
it would take
we can do that.
Forever.
No, it would not take forever.
We don't need the
timestamps. I'm just saying this stuff can be done, and it's not hard anymore.
This character is such an asshole, and the way and his lines are very asshole. So I find myself reading them, and they're probably the only time in the reading where I found myself enjoying myself because his lines are so dick.
Well, you'll probably have a better time with Break World, and as the books kind of get.
I don't know. You know what? My relationship with that book has changed.
Maybe not that one, but the new one where you've got the twin,
the clones, all the clones,
the clones, and that type of stuff might be more fun. I mean, this is
the book Break World. I loved that book. I still love that book. I think it's probably the better of the two I've written. But the thing is, I've had some people review that book in ways that I did not see it, and now that I see it that way, I'm like, oh god. There was somebody, I think I've mentioned this in the show. There was somebody who was a Vietnam vet who read that book, and they took it seriously. They took it very seriously. They thought that it was just it was PTSD, it was mass hallucination, and that they destroyed him in the end. And they said it was one of the most depressing books they ever read. And I was like, geez, I was looking for a connection, a reaction, but I wasn't trying to. And I was the thing was. When I read that, suddenly I realized that, there's something very, the movie Jacob's Ladder?
Of course, yeah.
Yes, there you go. Jacob's Ladder. That movie always disturbed me because it felt like there was, no way out for that character. Right?
Sorry, I thought you were asking the audience, not me.
No, I'm asking you.
Of course, I know Jacob's Ladder. Yes, I know Jacob's Ladder.
So what happened was, I've always been very disturbed by that movie. So the fact that my book is kind of like Jacob's Ladder, I'm like, oh shit, you're right. It is kind of like Jake, and realizing that and being and seeing it. That's the thing is that you write a book, and this is the other part of being an author that's weird. It was you draw a picture, and people can interpret the picture and they can experience the picture, but the picture is there on the page, right? I don't even fucking know if you're seeing what I'm telling you to see. You were telling me one of my characters looked like, and I was like, holy shit, that's not at all what that character looked like. But that's what your mind did, and that's what everyone's mind does. So it's I can give you so much, but you're going to run away with this and do your own thing with it. And so when you get that feedback back, you look at it and you're like, oh, geez, I never saw that. And then your relationship starts to change with it. Especially since it's out of your hands now. There's no more revisions. You've done it. It's out there. So it's a strange process to me, like I said, my relationship has changed with that book. It's a lot darker than it was before. When I first wrote that book, I was having a gay old time writing it and all the weird shit that was going on. Whereas now I read parts of it and I'm like, oh god. I was like, yeah, I can totally see how this would be incredibly dark. And I'm sure that'll happen with the new one, where I'll finish it and then I'll go. Somebody will be like, "You do realize that this whole book is a bunch of psychopath villains or something like that?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, you know what? Maybe they are psychopath villains." I mean, there's an amazing amount of murder in this book, and absolutely the one I'm writing right now. There is just a humongous amount of dead people in this book, and it's because my main character has the ability to basically speed up his body and slow time in his head. And has become a trick shot master. So those guys that can They could pull out a gun, like from a quick holster, and like shoot a bunch of targets, or like shoot a bunch of quarters out of the air, shit like that. Have you seen that?
Shit! Did you hear that? Did you hear that noise?
Hear what?
Sorry, I'm playing with the glaive and I hit the mic. You can hear it good. I'm like trying to.
There you go. But yeah, he's a trick shot master. But because he can speed his body up and slow time down, because he's a weird clone experiment, he can shoot 25 targets in a second. Right? So like, we're getting into Flash territory, right? But because he can shoot that quickly, there's never a conventional situation he finds himself in where he can't shoot his way out. So the body count on this character is immense. And so like I've had to create this whole internal philosophy for the character so that he doesn't feel like a monster. But even at one point, he refers to himself as the boogeyman because, he realizes that he likes it when people know enough about him to know to be scared, because then he doesn't have to shoot them. Because he's not a monster in the sense that he doesn't, he wants to scare people just enough so he doesn't actually have to do anything. Because the problem is if people don't know who he is, then they're going to die. And he hates that. So it's this kind of thing where like, yeah, there's a humongous body count in this book because this character being the way he is. And that's different. And I'm sure that when I finish writing this book, a couple of years down the road, I'll look back and be like, that guy was a monster or something like that. And then you question, you question your own sanity to some extent because you're like, Jesus, I created that and I didn't realize, It's the whole, did I make Frankenstein? I mean, Dr. Frankenstein did not think he was making a monster till he made the monster. And then he was like, oh shit, I made a monster. Fuck. So yeah. Being an author sucks.
Being a creative sucks.
No, and that's the thing. Yeah, we'll graduate from there. Yeah, being a creative sucks as well, especially when you're compelled. Like, there's people who are like, I'm gonna make art so I can make money, and like that's its own weird thing. But like, especially since I don't know if it's gonna work for you. But like, if you're someone who creates art, whether you make money or not, that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's
There are people who are like, I can't not do what I do, or I will.
No, and
it's
it's a regular income of pain. Is what that is. Mm-hmm. Where you're going to create, and then, who knows what happens to it. And at least with this kind of weird social media world we live in, you can at least get it out there. Maybe it'll go viral. Maybe someone will pay attention. You know what I mean?
Well, that's what I mean about it may not, in the prior to Everywhere Internet days.
Yeah.
The only real validation you would get from strangers would be money, because there weren't easy ways for somebody to send you a note and say, this is really good. I had a great time with it. You either had to get a literal letter, which meant that you had to have a mailing address that somebody could even access, which if you weren't a big author, what was the reality of that? Or it was money. Now you can put up a Patreon and people can join it and they can say, oh, this is great.
Maybe not. Who knows?
I don't have the money to contribute, but I'm really enjoying it. And that shit, listen, that's not, again, I say this a lot. That's not on my streams. I say it's not nothing. It's not nothing that somebody enjoys your stuff, even if they can't afford to pay you for it.
No, not at all. Listen, some of the happiest writing times of my life were when I was in college and I was writing on the Chatsubo, which was a news group, early internet days, right? Early internet days, when I think it was still, was that dial-up? That may have been dial-up at that point, which was a cyberpunk.
No, it was definitely prior. It was definitely early high-speed internet days, for sure. But I think that started as a bulletin board, so yes, that would be dial-up.
Yeah, it was a bulletin board, and that's what it was. It was a news group bulletin board, and people would write stories together, and you would post sections, and we all had kind of like our characters who would come in. It was almost like a D&D without a dungeon master. You were the dungeon master of your moment. And then we would write these long stories together. And it was this incredible collaborative process. The thing that's sad is that when they finally got themselves together and collected a whole bunch of that writing and publication, I was no longer a member, so I wasn't part of that. It was so sad. But that's some of the happiest times, was writing that and having this kind of regular interaction. Like I have a degree in writing popular fiction, which is really a presumptive thing, isn't it? But really what that degree is about is being able to actually write, that's number one, and then understanding markets and understanding publishing and understanding all these things that you've got to do and these things you have to think about, so you're not just writing the same old shit. And it was a great degree. I love being around other writers. It's fantastic. but I think to some degree, if you were gonna make it, you were already gonna make it. And it's they were people who were fantastic. I was telling my wife this the other day. Maybe I mentioned the show. I don't know. There was a guy there who had written like his, I think he was writing like his 6th or 7th book, and he had the wildest ideas. I mean, like deep space, Frank Herbert, Jesus incident type ideas, right? And they were awesome to listen to. It's so much fun. And he was just such a dry writer. It was so dry, and like, it wasn't lively. And I felt so bad because I was like, dude, like, you were so, your ideas are so good, And like Nella Hopkinson, like I went to school with Nella Hopkinson, who's an award-winning sci-fi writer, and she is a beautiful person. She writes lovely, and it was like so strange to be there with her, yeah. And like, but I will say this before we kind of seg out of this, because we've talked about it for long enough. The biggest laugh I've ever gotten from a reading of my book is from Artificial Fear, and it is the Woman with No Leg story, which I got from you, because I had to read an excerpt from my book when I graduated from that program, and I could pick whatever excerpt I wanted, and I stupidly was like, you know what? I think we're going to go with this one, because that's the kind of crowd it was.
Sure.
Somewhat, because a lot of people brought their parents, and people brought friends and family, because they were graduating from this program. They were proud. And everybody had sort of it was a thesis defense, is essentially what it was. Your book was your thesis, and then your defense was you reading an excerpt and then taking questions. And I read that sequence from the book. And my one of the guys who was my, what do you call it? My counselor on the program said to me later on, he was like, man, you walked this really fine line with that scene. He goes, and I was holding my breath to see if it was going to land, and then it did, and I took it just like, and it's so funny because that's a story that I got from you, that you got from some wacky guy at that place you used to work, and then I transformed it into a sci-fi thing, and then like, there you go. Yeah, weird shit, and you're absorbing. And that's the thing about, I think, being an artist, is that everything is absorption. Everything is going to become something, possibly. Maybe not intended, but it all becomes something.
Sure.
So it's a fascinating process, and I'm not going to give up. But I think I'm just not going to give it the energy. I don't think I'll ever give it the energy again that I used to when I was younger. When I had hope, when I had stupid ideas, I thought there was going to be a party. Now, there's no party. You just keep doing it because you're compelled to do it. And I think that's to some degree where you are. I don't think you think there's going to be a party, but you just keep doing it.
No, because if some random success came once, it can happen again.
Oh yeah, see, like I don't even. You have that. You have that little silver.
Well, but I didn't, and I was still doing it. So this is the point I make again and again and again, which is, I wasn't doing this with any expectation.
No,
you
were just doing it.
Come along.
Yeah.
So if that can happen to me, then it can happen to anybody, and that's the difference. Is when I was younger, there were none of these platforms to do that. It didn't exist.
Yeah.
You didn't have Patreon. You didn't have Instagram, TikTok, all these different things that really do cater to different creatives now. That's one of the things I think. I don't like this idea that you have to be everywhere. I don't think that's true. I think you have to pick those platforms that make sense for what you're doing, and that's where you are. So that's what I tell people, is pick 2 or 3 things that you think are the best avenues for what you're doing. Don't try to be everywhere. You're just going to go crazy.
You're going to tire yourself out. Being on Twitter, which I have not been on in...
Oh, it's so bad.
No, actually, you know what? Outside of Twitter itself, right? So outside the actual like mechanics of Twitter, the people on Twitter, right?
Yeah.
I am so perplexed by this absolute desperate need for self-gratification that people have. The way they fish for it, where they're like, "Oh my God, someone said this." The models are the worst. Where they're like, someone said I wasn't pretty. I'm pretty, right? And there's 100 people like, oh yeah, you're so pretty. You're so pretty. And I'm like, oh my God.
Pretty.
This is so
God,
disgusting.
don't let anybody
Like,
tell you otherwise. You're gorgeous.
yeah, Can
you send me a picture of your breasts at your earliest convenience, please? Thank you. So gorgeous.
It's so dirty. It's so like it leaves me with this kind of dirty feeling just kind of being there.
Yeah. Well, I will
And
say,
I look around.
I'm almost off it. I have been whittling down. It's great.
Oh man, and here's the thing: is like, it got in through the cosplayers. Let's be honest,
Sure.
because the authors aren't like that, and the artists, like the illustrators, the comic book guys, it didn't get in through there. It got in through the cosplayers, and the cosplayers are the ones that do it the most. And that was the only thing in my feed that got that in there. But they are relentless. Where they're like, oh my God, someone said that was ugly, and and tell me how beautiful I am. And everyone's like, oh, you're so beautiful. And it's like, oh, geez, I'm sure that to some level there's a positivity, because people are like, oh, you're, this is the tone thing, if it's, oh, you're not ugly, you're a lovely person, like that's fine, that happens in real life, right? But some of it's like, oh, I think you're the most beautiful person I've ever seen, and it's like your creepiness, right? Where it's like, it's fucking, yeah. I'm not used to this. I have like no interaction like this, so to see it, like I'm so late to the game, but I see it and I'm like, oh God. It's like, yeah. And like I know the world is just fucked up. I've told this story before, but I'm gonna tell it again just because it deserves people knowing. So many years ago, when I was in graduate school, we had a friend. So because you knew this person as well, you were less friendly with them. I was actually friends with them. That they got a dating manual, like an actual manual on how to get lots of dates, right? And it came in a binder. It was all professionally printed.
Of course it did.
And it was some of the most, like, I remember when I realized that this person was doing this, and I started looking through it, I was like, what the fuck is this? And like it was like so gross. And like I'll never forget, one of them was like, make a mystery or create a mystery about yourself. Like, be mysterious. Do something that draws them in, even if it's not true. I mean, there was a big even if it's not true, should have been like the main statement of this thing. But my friend was like, oh yeah, I'm totally using it. He's like, because my friend uses it and it works really well. And his friend was the type of person that would be like, hey, do you want to come over to my place and we can put up Christmas decorations? And then people would be like, oh, that's so sweet, right? So then he'd have a girl come over and he would use that as the impetus, and they'd put up Christmas things, and then maybe he'd get lucky, right? And then he would take them all down and do it again the next day with somebody else. And I was like, oh God. I was like it's just gross, man. Like it just feels, I mean, like, if your only pursuit in life is to get laid, then I guess this, this is your manual, right? This is your Bible. But like, I don't see a healthy relationship coming from create a mystery about yourself. And the thing is, there's weird fucking shit out there. I know that the world is fucked up. Even beyond that, but on a human level, I know the world is that fucked up. And I know that that's like those personalities and that kind of ick is going to be there in Twitter. It's just I don't normally have to see it. So when I see it, I'm like, oh God. It's like, I'm good. Don't engage. I like your cosplay. It's very cool. It's very neat.
Sure.
But I don't need to tell you, because you've
it.
got 6,000 other people who are mouth breathing,
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, and listen, I like some naughty photography. I love Coop's nudes. The fact that he left, when he left, was it, oh Jesus, what's that service called? Flickr. When he left Flickr.
Flickr, yeah.
Yeah, when Coop left Flickr, he left a hole in my heart. Because I loved looking at his photos. Like,
I know.
A man who has that, like, just intense devotion to that kind of smutty photography, I mean, it's enviable. I love it. Like, I love it beyond the fact I wasn't even turned on by it half the time. But I thought it was, like, cool that he was that intense and he would take all his...
it's very... One of the things I delight most in with him on Blue Sky is many of the models, or a good portion of them are on there.
Yeah.
And he posts photos all the time from these different shoots. And they'll say, "Oh, that was a really fun shoot." He says, "Thank you for making an old pervert's day." He says things like that, and it's just great because it's like something. It's just got the delight and the smut all mixed in. Yeah. Where he's genuinely very enthusiastic. Where he's like, "Oh, thanks for making an old pervert's day." Because it'll be a woman sucking on her own toe. He's like, "Thanks for making an old pervert's day."
And that was a lot of them. Yeah, I mean, and the thing is, like, I know why he left Flickr, but I'm sad he left Flickr because that was kind of where I saw him.
Well, he gets driven off a lot of the platforms because they all kind of go through this period of, oh, no, no nudity. No nudity.
Yeah. And the thing is, like, I should just join his Patreon. It's just one more place to go.
I think it's $2. It's $2 a month. That's
Does he post a lot of his nudes there?
Well, he posts a lot of drawings, and then, yeah, he does. But also,
listen. I also love Coop's art, but I mean, it's just like this other thing that I do miss that about Flickr. So here's the thing: I love naughty photography. But I'm also not really the type to engage about it. I have a very strong don't engage policy because very often the engagement, it doesn't come off the way you think it's going to come off.
No.
So my mind is like, why, other than to say, hey, great work, why bother? Why engage? It can get creepy so fast, especially with artists that you like.
Well, that's one of the things I actually did I did a 5 this week, where because I had done some feedback to Amp Pruitt's podcast, which I do often, and in that he was talking about people and their phones, and I said, the biggest problem not problem is the wrong word for it, but I said the biggest difference, I think, with people who are younger than kind of our age, which is the crossover, where there was persistent internet and there's not smartphones and there wasn't, is we are aware of a time where there weren't smartphones. Therefore, it's easy for us to say this isn't important and I don't need to look at it. So I did a whole 5 on that. And in the course of that, one of the things that I thought of was, well, you know what? I'm going to do another one where I say that for people who are online a lot, if you have never done this, try this. Try going 2 weeks where the only things you say online are positive things. Try it.
Oh, okay.
Because that's generally my policy, is I will repost things by others or respond directly to things.
Oh, you mean like on Twitter and stuff like that?
Yeah, on whatever it is. And, because there's all different ones now. There's Threads, there's Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, whatever it is. Your only original posts, meaning that you generate them yourselves, are positive.
I don't tend to be a negative person. I'm not thinking about it. I don't really like.
Well, but a lot of people are.
Yeah.
And that's where I said, if you've never done it, try this for 2 weeks.
Even
only
on here,
say nice things, or
even on here, we don't often needlessly attack people.
No, it's one of the reasons I do the movie reviews I do now, which is almost all the time positive, or at least trying to conjure up positive.
And even when we give something a bad review, we're almost hurt about it. You know what I mean? Like.
Oh, I don't enjoy it.
No, that's what I mean. Like my continued review of Rings of Power. I'm sad that I don't like it because I want to like it, but I just can't. And I think that's where I'm at now with some of these reviews, where you're like, don't get me wrong, there is some shit that's just bad. I have seen some stuff, I've read some stuff where I'm like, this isn't that good. And you almost feel bad about it because, like I said, you don't want to come out and be like, fuck this person. But there was a time
unless it's malicious. That's the difference. Yes, malicious, most of the time, what people harp on is not because the person is a bad person. It's just because they don't like that particular thing. Well, the person probably made it with good intention, so I don't need to shred them for that.
Yeah, there's a time where we attacked Star Wars so much. And now, I kind of look at it and go, you know what? Some of it entertains me and some of it doesn't. I'm not going to bother. It just doesn't. We've evolved past certain subjects.
It also comes with the experience of time and seeing that others can make things worse than we thought George Lucas could. At one time that was the worst we had because he had total control. Then he gave it up, and worse decisions were made. And
some good, some bad.
Sure, of course. No, I'm not saying it was all bad, but you see that it wasn't necessarily quite as black and white as you might have expected it to be.
So, it's but the positivity thing, it's I had to get my kids phones recently.
Because you were asking me if there were non-data phones. Which are not easy to find.
My daughter figured out a loophole that we didn't see. And this is usually how this works. This is going to be a parenting lesson here for you, right?
Ooh, good.
Yeah. So my kids have iPads, but they only use them for certain periods of time during the day. They're not allowed to take them out of the house, right? They don't really have access to browsers personally. They have access to browsers through school, and the school has a locked network, right? So they can't really get too much. And the whole thing was we're just trying to slow them down, right? They know stuff is out there. They've searched for things with me when they've been looking for something. Like, if something's come up for school and we need information, or my son and I go looking for Transformers, something like that, right? So they're aware of it, but in a very passive sense. It's not a big thing in their life. And my daughter has gotten very big into, like, she's got more of a social life now, and she's FaceTiming people, and she's getting in more. And the funny thing is, she's a younger one too. And my son's kind of like, I just don't have an interest in this shit. But my daughter has an iPod, like an old school iPod, which I don't even know if they make those anymore. It's a relic, and she figured out, like, and the thing is, I stripped these devices of like anything that they could really do something bad with, right? So it's a very, we built a walled garden within the walled garden. Is really what we did, right? Mm-hmm. And so the other day, she took her iPod out with her, and she was like, you know what? I can FaceTime from wherever there's Wi-Fi. She figured out, yeah. So, and the thing is, like, I was like, shit, yeah, you can. And like, I don't know why I didn't think that she would, but she did. And so she went out, and she wanted to go out with friends, and rather than, like, she said, fuck it, I'll FaceTime them from the school Wi-Fi to inform them that I'm going to do this. But then she didn't get hold of us. So she was like, you know what? I'll just find Wi-Fi elsewhere and I'll inform them. Which, let me tell you, one of the scariest things ever is when the school bus gets there and your kid's not on it. So we had kind of a minor freak out. Yeah. And then what it was is that because the FaceTime calls weren't coming through because she had really, really, like, bad Wi-Fi. So she finally got a steady enough Wi-Fi, got through us, and was like, why haven't you been answering the phone? And we were like, because your calls didn't come through. And, we had to have this whole talk about, hey, next time, if you don't get an answer to your question, and the answer is no, come home, right? We were like, shit, she's figuring out a loophole in the communication. She needs communication because if we don't do something about it, she'll do something about it. So we were like, okay. And then that triggered a need to change, a need to do something. And our response to it was, we'll just get flip phones. We don't need the smart devices yet. Especially since when I went to pick her up, she had been hanging out with her friends. And when I got there she was sitting on like a bench with her two friends. And they were both sitting there looking at their phone, and no one was talking. And I was like, I'm not really sure this constitutes hanging out. Either way. So yeah, we were like, we'll get them flip phones for communication basis. And when we did, we got them, minutes. There's minutes and there's texting. That's it. There's no there's no data, and they were happy to have it. So I was like, that's good. Actually, my son wasn't happy to have it. My son was like pissed. He was like, really, I have to carry this? Like, he was very annoyed, but he's taking more off my introvert tree.
Well, you know what? That's good because you have a way to get to him, but he's not going to be interested in it really, so that's fine.
Yeah. But it is interesting, and it's it's weird. It's kind of the slow technological graduation, and the thing is, like, if we can graduate slowly, then hopefully by the time we get to the point where they've got truly dangerous levels of access, it won't be as dangerous for them. Because here's the thing, you can Google anything. If I'd had modern day Google when I was in early high school and middle school, right? Oh my God, the trouble I would have gotten into. Just the shit I would have looked up. I would have looked up everything. Sure. I was a very curious kid. Free pornography? Holy shit. The only thing that stopped me from looking at naked girls when I was younger was the fact that A, I didn't have a girl to take her clothes off, or B, that I had to go actively buy nudie mags at the store. And wasn't there an age limit on those? You couldn't buy them until you were a certain age anyway. I can't remember.
I think, I want to say there was. Yeah,
it was like, right. Yeah, there was an age thing, right? So it's like, yeah, so to have unfettered access, right? And the thing is, like, I don't know what their level of curiosity is because they're kids, but I had an extremely high level of curiosity. I still do. So it's like I would have looked up all kinds of shit. So it's one of those things you're trying to limit the spigot of data until they kind of get a handle on themselves. And that's, I think that's kind of the larger problem we have, which is that you've got a lot of parents who don't put any limitations and they just hand their kids a smartphone.
Right.
And then you are sitting there going, okay, well, now you are completely dependent on when your child gets curious about something. Yeah. And the communication with their friends and what level, where their friends are at. So like there has been an sort of communication bloom of late. And my daughter's been getting a lot of FaceTime calls, and she's been getting a lot of texts, and she's got this little group of friends, and there's far more activity than there's ever been before. And I'm kind of sitting there going, okay, well, I got to monitor this and make sure that there's nothing weird going on. And I've already explained to them, don't send naked pictures of yourself to anybody. It's child pornography. It is a crime. It's like, I don't care if you like somebody or whatever. No. Like, that's like my biggest fear right there. That's if I could just get them through this because it's very funny. I was trying to explain this to my mother, who I've said before in the show, grew up in a dirt floor farm in Cuba, and she's baffled by the levels of technology that we have today, and only recently really got her head around the idea of sexting, and sending nude pictures. And she was like, why would they do that? And I'm like, well, because people want to see them, Mom. And I was like, listen, when I was in high school, if a girl wanted to send you, or a boy, whatever, if a person wanted to send you a naughty picture, right, they either had to have a Polaroid camera, which is why Polaroid cameras were so dangerous, or they had to have a friend who worked at a photomat, who would then make those photos, like develop those photos, right? I had the double whammy. I was sleeping with a girl who worked at a photomat, so you can imagine the fireworks there. So that's the only way, really. Other than that, they had to draw one. They had to draw you a photo, right? Whereas today, it's like it's that simple. You could just take a photo, and that's a crime. You know what I mean? Like, and the thing is, like, for a kid, it's like, well, you don't really grasp because, like, I just took a photo of myself. Why is that a crime? You're like, oh, it is a crime. And this is why it's all so dangerous, because no one understands the kind of the seriousness of what they're doing. When my oldest got their first cell phone, they went onto Facebook and posted their number. And then when we found out, we were like, what the fuck? And they proceeded to get all kinds of weird phone calls for the next 6 months, where we were blocking weird numbers left and right. And now they understand that was not a good thing, but that's a hard lesson, isn't it? Where all of a sudden it's like you're just getting terrorized for months. So yeah, we live in very strange times, and I'm trying to keep my foot on the brake, because if I can somehow simulate the whole 10 o'clock people environment, maybe they can have a little more control of this. And for those who don't know what we're talking about, it's the idea of the 10 o'clock people, the people who are just in that perfect sweet spot of having just enough, not too much, not too little of a certain thing that makes it so that you're kind of special, right? So like Joe and I grew up with this technology as it was slowly evolving, so we didn't get unfettered access, but we still, we, like you said, we remember a time without this technology, but we also, the technology didn't get powerful enough for us to get into serious trouble until we were older. Trying to simulate that with my kids is difficult, because I don't know. I want them to have access, I want them to have freedom, but I also need to limit them. And so you're in this kind of strange position where you're a bit of a bad guy. But they also don't know what they don't have, but they're slowly starting to figure it out because their friends do. So it's tough. And so far, nobody is suffering from social media psychotic depression. So I think I'm doing okay. But yeah, but you never know. You just never know. And you will
I have nothing to add to that.
So. Well, I know.
Well, no, that's what I mean. Is when it comes to parenting stuff, I often don't even have an opinion because,
Oh, you can have an opinion.
No, but I mean, not because I don't have, well...
Yeah, you can have a logical
in some cases, I really
things,
don't, because this is one of those areas where I am very aware that there is a very harsh line where my views on things as an adult cannot possibly translate to children. Number one, because I'm not a child, and because when I was a child, none of this stuff existed. So it's tough to
and
even,
you have to, yeah.
And also because when it's your children, the frame of reference is completely different, even if you had these things as a child. Because there's a level of concern and knowledge that I simply don't have.
Well, and the funny thing...
There's an interesting debate that... Actually, this is a good question for you, because you are a parent.
Shit.
There's this debate going on about things like... Because right now... Oh, God, where was it? There was some place where they're saying that they want to... They're calling social media addictive for children. And
yes.
there's, legislation in some place, right?
Yeah.
And so there's a generally among
no social media
who,
till you're 18 or something like that?
Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah,
sounds right. So, all right. And so there are people who are like, well, that's an overstep. That's a parent's decision. And then there are people who are like, okay, but we just saw a bunch of accidentally unredacted documents from TikTok where they clearly said, we know we're doing things that harm children, but if we try to address it, we will minimize how many users we have.
Yeah.
So the other side is, it should be a parent's decision, assuming all things are equal, but all things are not equal.
Equal, yes.
That's the problem. So where do you come down on that?
So where do I come down on this? Okay, so my kids have no form of social media whatsoever.
Okay, but what I mean is, do you think it's an overstep to have a law that says you cannot use it till you're 18, or should that be your thing?
So do I think that it should be a law? Well, here's the thing. It all depends on what you are getting and what you're not getting, right? So I get nervous about these overstep laws because you overstep a little bit and you can overstep a lot, right? But then we also have laws that say you can't drink until you're 21. You can't buy, we were just talking about how you can't buy porn until a certain age. You can't remember what that is. But I think it's like 16, 17, right? Something like that. You can't buy porn. I think, maybe it's 18. Maybe it's just 18 for Porn Max, because you can't create an account on a porn site unless you're 18, right? You can't drive till you're a certain age. We put a natural limitation on anything that has the potential to be destructive, right? So like pornography can be destructive. Why? Because it can create a completely outmoded idea of reality in your interrelationship, physical contact, right? But you could also make the argument that really violent movies do that. Hence the reason they're rated R. Hence the reason why you can't get tickets to a rated R movie until you're a certain age. So you could almost say that, we are already creating these limitations because we understand that when the brain is young and it's open for to be influenced, we try to limit the influence of truly intense shit, right? So, think about that. When you were younger and you would, sneak into a rated R movie and you'd be like, my God, this is fucking amazing. Yeah, that shit affected you deeply because it was it was more than you were ready for. I can't
Okay, so it's age of consent. Whatever the age of consent is. You would not believe how much I had to do just to find out how old you have to be to buy porn. Because at first I started off and I said, how old do I have to be to buy Penthouse?
Listen, I'm pretty sure 18 is the age of consent.
Yeah, well, it depends. There's 16 in some states.
That's true, yeah.
But, 16 is the lowest I'm seeing for the U.S. anyway.
So with this social media thing, I think what people have problems with this is that if it were cigarettes, if it were vaping, if it were something that you physically did that hurted your body, I think that people wouldn't have an issue with this. I think the fact is that you're doing something that psychologically hurts you. And this goes back to the whole, my parents didn't believe in psychological issues because they couldn't see them, therefore they didn't exist. My parents didn't believe in insomnia. They thought that, I just didn't want to go to sleep and I was being a problem child. But no, they didn't believe in psychological issues because that's invisible and that shit doesn't exist. So it's this is an invisible problem. This is a problem that can destroy very often young women. But it destroys men as well, young men. It can destroy people. It is addictive. It gives you a warped sense of reality. It can really fuck with people's minds. Are there people that can handle it at a young age? Yeah, there's people who can also handle R-rated movies, who start drinking when they're fucking 13 and somehow grow up to be reasonable individuals, Listen, I don't know anybody who started having, well, that's not true. I think I know one person who started having sex past the age of 18. Everyone else I know started having sex younger than that. I know somebody who started having sex at the age of 13, which baffles me because that's my son's age, and I don't want to think about that. So it's like, yeah. So do I think that they should put a limit on it? You know what? I'm not against it. I do worry about the overstep, but I'm not
Well, that's
necessarily.
the tricky part.
Yeah, I'm not overly against them doing it, but I do acknowledge that it is a slippery slope.
Well,
but I also,
and especially because the reality is, what other avenue is there for protection against large companies but the government?
And the thing is, a lot of parents are not going to understand this damage. A lot of parents are too busy, or it's just something that they are not engaged with. So it's kind of like anime, right? Were your parents aware of the shit that you were watching when you were a kid? What animated shit you were watching?
No, not really. I don't think they even knew.
Yeah, it was cartoons, right?
It's
cartoons. He's watching Bugs Bunny. It can't be bad, right?
I mean,
and then
again,
there you are.
My parents were similar, where like my dad and I watched Terminator 2, and it's like people are getting wiped out all the time. But again, I don't think they ever.
But he watched it.
Way, so.
But he watched it with you.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So, and my parents taught me that that's not real. So it was pretty obvious to me that this was fakery.
But like my parents were unaware of animated movies. When I started watching anime, they were like, "Oh, it's cartoons!" And I'm like, "It's." I'm watching. Was it a Rokosaki Dojo where the demon's fingers turn into penises?
Ninja Scroll.
Like, yeah. Oh God.
Where a gigantic man holds up a woman by her legs, and I'm sure if they'd seen that, they would have been like, "Whoa,
I thought this was like Bugs Bunny." Yeah, exactly. So here's the thing. Being a parent, I know that there's shit I don't know. There's loopholes, and your kids will find it because humanity, we're all about finding loopholes. We are clever motherfuckers. That is our skill. That is what we do.
And let's be honest, I don't know about you, but I delighted in showing people at school that didn't know what stuff was, what it was, especially if it was warped. I had a lot of fun with that.
Like, hey guys,
I remember bringing in Heavy Metal magazine and showing it to kids who had never seen adult illustrations of any kind.
I had a subscription to Heavy Metal magazine when I was 14 years old.
Yeah,
right.
But you, I'm sure, like me, knew people who had no idea that this even existed.
You know what? And here's the thing: I walked up to my parents and I said, "Hey, can I get a subscription to a magazine?" And they were like, "What?" They were baffled by the fact that I wanted a subscription to a magazine, right? Because they were like, "Oh my God, he's reading." And then I was like, "Yeah, it's a science fiction magazine." They were like, "Okay," right? And then and the covers were always like kind of girls in science fiction, but there's no nudity, right? Because
very often,
very
often Julie Strain inspired, or Julie Strain herself.
Usually some Simon Bisley, right? But I mean, those magazines were filthy. They were fantastic, but they were filthy. They were all R-rated. Pornographic. I mean, there were some genuinely very good, straightforward science fiction stories in there, and some really disturbing ones too. Yeah. But I had a subscription to that when I was 14 because they weren't paying attention.
Right.
And that's the thing, is that I think that there's every generation has to endure the negligence of the previous generations, right?
Yes.
So. The children.
But that's what I mean, is no matter what you control, somebody who's an asshole like me will say, "Oh, I've heard of Ranger Rick. Have you heard of Danger Dick? Look at this!" and open up a Heavy Metal, and it's like, whoa.
You take social media away tomorrow, and only the people who've had it are going to be angry about it. And you know what? They'll live. And when they turn 18, they can go get it. And the people who never had it aren't going to give a shit. You know how I know this? Because we didn't have it, and we didn't give a shit.
Well, I think that's honestly the thing that is most interesting about the idea of a social media ban is, would a lot of these companies survive if they couldn't hook you young?
Yeah, and here's something I realized recently about texting, right? So my kids text, right? They use iMessage. They text me if they're on the other side of the house, which is very annoying. But like they text their friends, and they don't have phone numbers. They do it through iMessage, and that's how they do it. And they have limitations on that, but there is communication going on, and they prefer to text. My oldest prefers to text, and I sit there and go, why do I don't like texting unless I have to, right? And I realize it's because I grew up with a cell phone that had a number pad, and to text people was the last resort. You didn't text people with a flip phone unless you could not call them, unless you were like in a situation where calling was not available. Then you texted them. right? Or if you knew that they couldn't get a call, they could only get a text maybe, right? But texting was last resort, right? Texting didn't get big until suddenly there was a keyboard, which is why people texted a lot on Blackberries, right? But you remember, like, having a Blackberry was almost like its own weird thing, right? You were a Blackberry person. You know, you were texting, and emailing, and blah, 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 because you had a Blackberry, right? That was like a weird thing growing up. But, like, texting didn't get big till there was a keyboard. And then other people started texting a ton. And now everybody does it. And nobody likes to make phone calls. Like, young people are my oldest had to learn phone etiquette from us. Where they were like, well, what do I do when I call? I'm like, you say hello, and you say your name, and you ask who this is. You know, and like the first couple of times they did it, it was painful to like, I was sitting there like kind of, because they were nervous, and I was sitting there kind of watching, and I'm like, oh my God, it's like, this is really
that's
bad.
Bizarre.
It is, right? Because to you,
No.
that makes no sense. But like, to me, I had to teach somebody phone etiquette. And let me tell you, holy shit, my daughter now gets phone calls from, you know, when before she had any kind of like messaging, or before she had any kind of technology, people would call, and I would get these, like, I would get these stunted kids being like, you know, like, hello, is so and so there? And I'd be like, and I mean, really awkward. I'd be like, who is this? And they'd be like, I can't tell you that. And I'm like, what? And they'd be like, you know, I'm so and so's father. And they're like, oh, I know them from school. And I was like, okay. And then my daughter would come over and be like, oh, this is so and so. They didn't want to give your name because you were a stranger. I'm like, yeah, but they called you. Like, you know, it's just this. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. We've had some interesting experiences. And the thing is that to us,
I should laugh though, because my mother calls and says, Joe, this is your mother, and I'm like, Mom. But
Yeah,
you know why that is? It's because
Yeah.
she grew up without caller ID.
yeah. So how would you know?
Where you had to tell, So whereas I'm like,
you
Mom,
had to
I
tell
have
them
you in
because
my
the
phone. I know
the
who you are.
Bakelite phone would just ring, and you'd pick it up and be like, who the fuck is this?
Well, it's like we were watching an episode of Frasier where they talked about Star 69. That's a very specific cultural
I love Star
reference.
69. Yeah.
Yeah. Like
sounds
now,
pornographic,
younger
doesn't it,
people
when you
don't
say
know
it
what
like
it
that?
does. It
Hey,
really does.
Did you
Because
use
and it's the
Star
way people say,
69?
"Oh, she Star 69'd us." It's like, whoa.
Yeah. It's just a
She
callback
roofied
service.
you?
It calls the last
Yeah.
number back.
Well, that's again for people who don't
Yeah.
know what Star 69 is. And there may be people listening to this, is not to insult you, but you may not know what Star 69 is.
Yeah, when people called you,
it
your
was
phone
before everybody
your phone
had
didn't
caller
keep a
ID.
record. Yeah, your phone didn't
Right.
keep a record.
By the way,
so if somebody called you,
here's a
Yeah.
demonstration. Jesus Christ. All right, open up you. I'm talking to you, Lando. Open
Yeah.
up your search, whatever your search engine of choice is,
okay.
because I was going to put a link to it, and
Yeah.
put star, the asterisk, star 69 in. Oh, and then notice that in your image section, all you have is porn.
Hold on.
That's how much of a non-reference it is anymore.
Oh,
all I got
actually,
was
you know what? I just have a whole ton of 69s.
there. That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
No. Not pornographical ones. I mean the number. I've literally got the number 69.
Oh, really? Oh no,
Yeah.
I did. I went to search.
Yeah.
I went to the search bar, and in the empty search,
No, I went
thing,
to
put an
Google.
asterisk 69.
I went to Google and I typed in asterisk star 69 and I got
Oh, and
the
your
number
image
69.
image results don't have a bunch of porn in them?
No, they don't. Which is
Oh,
weird
wow.
for me because I like having
Yeah.
some porn in my image results.
No. I got. Yeah,
You-
originally
you know
it was
what?
called
Listen,
Last Call
you-
Return.
You must just have a much filthier search engine than I do.
I guess. I mean, I don't
got a
have any
problem,
restrictions on mine. Maybe that's it.
I don't have any
So
restrictions
it
on
will
mine.
look
either.
at
Who are
anything
you
it
talking
wants
to?
to.
Jesus.
I'm just saying. I don't know why mine's filthier than yours.
It's the algorithm, man.
I guess.
So yeah, and the thing is, like, growing up, I had a phone, and I loved the phone. I called people all the time. I called people, and I had long phone conversations. I used to love going on, like, when I got the phone in the car, and like the headset. I used to love going on long drives and randomly calling people I wanted to catch up with. Honestly, social media and texting destroyed a lot of my relationships because before texting and Facebook, people would call and catch up. And I'd call them and catch up. And it was great because you had this human connection. And it's like now, the fucked up part about today is that we have fucking FaceTime. We have Star Trek technology and nobody wants to use it. They just want to text each other. You know, it's like, geez, we can see each other's faces and talk. Whenever I travel, my wife and I, we don't call each other. We FaceTime each other. And I'm always like, oh, this is hilarious. I was like, I love it. It doesn't wear off on me. That we can actually see each other look tired. You know what I mean? But yes, so what ends up happening is, we have to explain these things to our kids.
Or when you said, oh, it's nice to see how old I've become.
Yeah, let me tell you, one of the worst parts of FaceTime is that you can see yourself.
Oh, yeah.
Like in the corner, and I was like, oh, God. I was like, I look tired, too. Jesus.
Everybody does,
Yeah.
Right. We're all, I got to get that goddamn clip from the thing. We're all really tired now. Nobody trusts anybody. That's such a perfect evergreen clip.
Where's that from?
That's from the thing. Remember when he's sitting there and he's narrating it?
Yeah,
he's like, nobody trusts anybody anymore, and we're all very tired.
Yeah, I mean, there you go. Yeah, that's social media for you. So,
Boy,
so when you say to me the idea that we should make it illegal, you know what? I think we should make it illegal for like 5 years and see what happens. You might see a social improvement. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. The next generation that comes up, they might get to the age where they can use the technology and go, it's fucking stupid, right? And then you'll still have all these parents arguing, like, hate texting each other through fucking Blue Sky or Twitter or fucking Facebook and all this shit, But listen, it's a lot easier to be a hateful motherfucker when you can do it without anybody seeing your face or having to see anybody. It's a lot harder to scream at somebody to their face, especially when you're a Nazi, because you get punched. Let me tell you. Yeah, that's a great GIF if you haven't seen that. Yeah. So I'm not against it. The fear is always the overstep, and the overstep is very slippery. But you know what? Oh, man, what was it? Have you ever seen the video of people complaining? I think it was the seatbelt laws, but people complaining about the seatbelt laws. There's like some news footage you can find, and people were talking about that shit like it was the end of the world. Yeah. And that's the thing, is that whenever a law has been put in place, because for lack of a better phrase, people are fucking idiots, people, there's resistance. Listen, when they created a drinking age, I'm sure people lost their shit. When they created seatbelt laws, people lost their shit. When you had to when I know that I remember when suddenly you had to wear seatbelts in the back of the car.
Oh yeah.
Like you always kind of were supposed to, but like when they got serious about that shit.
Yeah.
I was fucking pissed because I had been bouncing around the back of the car, not giving a shit for years, and all of a sudden I had to be belted down, and you're like, nobody likes that shit. Nobody likes to have a law come in and change. Helmets. Oh my God! Did you wear helmets when you were biking as a kid?
I never rode a bike.
Oh, I forgot.
I don't know how to ride a bike.
I never wore helmets. Me and my friends rode around, and we were like, no shoes, no shirts. No helmets.
Okay. When I rode a 4-wheeler, I didn't. So I guess it's the same difference.
Oh, that's even worse. Yeah.
Because those go a lot faster.
Find a way to
I
make
almost
it
did
so
come
much
off before
worse.
one of them. Actually, I rolled off the back of one, and I had no helmet, and I got lucky. Except that I rolled into a gigantic bush of thorns, and then the thing rolled on top of me.
Well, it caught you, man. It caught you.
It did.
It caught you, and it held on to you.
It certainly did stop me. Yes.
Yes. But it's so it's like, we all freak out when these laws are created, and then after the fact, we're like, like smoking. Oh, you can't smoke unless you can't buy cigarettes unless you're a certain age. People are like, what the fuck? And I'm like, yeah. And the thing is, I don't think that worked because there were so many kids in my high school that smoked. So
well, okay, and see that was the point I was making a while back. Is if it was banned, if you had never encountered anybody, let's say you were actually in a school where nobody smoked, and so up until 18, you never encountered a cigarette. Yeah. When you then encountered one at 19 or whatever, do you really think you'd want to at that point, or would you have seen it as, oh God, this is disgusting?
You know what? They banned.
It's interesting to think about. I don't know.
They banned cigarettes on my campus, like my high school campus. And I remember that people used to walk to basically the edge of the property.
Oh, okay. Well, but so
crowd of people. But I mean, would you be interested? Listen, it's up to the individual. If you thought that you could somehow curry favor from a group, and there was like some level of peer pressure, the thing is that at that point you might not be as responsible. But I'm gonna say one word that will kind of put this in a different light for you: frats. Right?
Sure. Yeah.
How often do people die doing dumb shit because of frats?
I know.
So here's the thing: will you help your kids to keep them away from social media? Yeah. In fact, I think the only thing you really need to know is that Steve Jobs and
and Bill Gates, yeah.
have tried as hard as they can with all their money to keep their children as far from that fucking technology.
I'll tell you what, anytime people come up and say, "Oh, no, technology isn't as bad as you think," those are the two people you bring up right away.
Oh yeah, yeah. And the thing is, when I read that told me everything I needed to know. And here's the thing: when my kids get old enough, like, listen, I don't know how long we're gonna be on flip phones, right? I hope to stay here for a while. I don't feel the need for them to have more. I mean, they already have iPads that are, like I said, on a very sort of limited control, but when they get old enough and mature enough that I think I can trust them with the technology not to completely fuck their lives, yeah, listen, I'll let them have more of it. But one day they'll turn 18 and they will do whatever the hell they want with it. They'll go drive a car and drink and smoke and whatever they want. And hopefully by the time they get there, they will be responsible enough not to destroy themselves. But there's people who destroy themselves at every age.
That's right.
There's a woman that we know who is in her 50s, and she had a very awful. Her spouse died, and it is one of the most awful stories I've ever heard. I think I told you about this with the guy that her partner, her husband died, and then she found out that he had multiple young children with other women.
I remember this.
Yeah,
yes.
It's like the most worst case scenario story you can hear. Where she was, the spouse died and she was like, "Oh my God, I loved him and I'm never gonna move on and I loved him so much." And then within a couple months, it was like, "What? He did what?" And all these stories just kept coming out and just making it worse and worse and worse. And you're like, "He raped who?" It was just horror, right? So she decided to get back into dating, and she understood that, today people go online. So she got an app, and she met a few people, and she met a guy, and he seemed really cool, and they started texting for about a week or two, and she was like, "Oh my God, this is going really, really well." And I mean, this is of course, this is probably a year after this guy's passed away, right? And all this horrible shit has happened to help push her along. And so she was talking to this guy, and she sent him some risque photos, right? And the second he got them, he turned around and said, "Now send me this much money or I'm going to text this to your kids." And she was like, "What?" And it became a whole thing. She had to call the cops, and it's like, yeah, this is a 50-year-old woman. This is not a child, You know what I mean? So yeah. I'm not entirely against the law, because this stuff it overstimulates kids, and it cultivates depression and gives people a warped sense of reality, and and their minds aren't ready for it. And the people who create the technology know it's fuck off addictive, and they specifically design it to be that addictive. And this is kind of no different than if Coca-Cola started putting cocaine back in their shit. They were like, "Hey, we don't know why we're so popular all of a sudden, but everybody loves us. By the way, we don't let our kids drink this shit." It's like, yeah. It's like, yeah. That's how fucked up it is. It's just, yeah. So no, I'll be. I don't think it'll happen. I think that these companies are just reaping in far too much data, and they're making way too much money off of this. And I think they will absolutely nip this in the bud. This is like Cyberpunk 101. These corporations are not going to let you fuck with their source of revenue. Especially when, get them young, man. Get them young and you got them forever. I absolutely don't think this is going to happen. The only thing that may ruin it for one of these companies is the whole thing with, TikTok was owned by a Chinese company?
Chinese company, yeah.
Yeah, and that is the only thing. Fear of the Reds, man. Fear of communism. That's the only thing that I think that would make them actually outlaw one of these things. But no, I think that these corporations are far too savvy and have far too much money, and I think that they will never let that happen. So it'll be fucking fascinating if the government even tries. And that, I guess that's the comical part of the slippery slope, which is to say that, yeah, it's a slippery slope, But it's not like it's fucking easy for them to do. I mean, this is not a slippery slope. And in reality, this is an uphill battle. This is a near like sheer drop uphill battle, because the amount of money that's going to be thrown out of it, and the amount of people that are going to be like, no, we love our device, we love social media, and they're going to come up with all the reasons why it's so great. Never going to happen. Which is not to say it shouldn't. I'd be so curious what 5 years without social media would look like for kids. Just long enough for them to forget, you know? Because, I mean, when you don't have it in your life, I don't have it in my life.
That's the interesting part, is what is
Yeah,
the
like,
opposite.
that's
That's
the
what I
thing.
mean about if you didn't have something up until 18 when you had some level of maturity.
Yeah.
Would it still have
I
the
mean,
same
listen,
impact if you had it around?
Listen, people can still text. I mean, that's here's the other part of this, is that even without social media, people can still do dumb shit with their devices. Like, you can still accidentally send naked pictures of yourself to your partner and create child pornography. You know what I mean? Like, so there's even without social media, there's a ton of shit you could do wrong. You know, and here's the thing is, here's the slippery slope for you. Video games. You know how people are like, oh, video games are addictive. Video games are violent, right? They put an age rating on games. Right? I'm sure we lost our minds when they did that. But now, there are games that are rated R. They won't sell them to young people. And there are games that are like everybody. And there's games for teens. And you know, if we have an age rating on video games, then why wouldn't we have an age rating on social media? You know? Maybe it's just about creating, you know, you're only allowed to have local networks or something like that when you're at a certain age. You know? And the thing is, because I don't have things like TikTok, and because I guess I just don't have that level of need for someone to make me feel good about myself because of a video I posted, I don't fully understand the addiction. Like, when I read a ton of articles, I read a whole book about this shit that really, like, disturbed me. And I don't have that effect, so I don't understand it. I don't get that chemical response. So for me, I look at this stuff and I'm kind of like, I'll just shut it off. But it's me, and I know that's just me. I'm also not, you know, I'm not a smoker, I'm not a drinker, you know. But listen, you know what? I like food. I'd love to lose some pounds, and I can't convince myself to stop eating, you know, cinnamon baked goods because they're so fucking good. And maybe if it's like that, then yeah. Do I want someone to ban cinnamon baked goods from my life? Not really. But if they were really going to hurt me and that was like the way, I mean, here's the thing. Like, there are people who are genuinely in like life-threatening levels of obesity, and these people get their organs stapled. They get given shots to make them stop eating. You know, like, like people go to these extreme, you know, when something is truly an addiction. So, in closing, never going to happen, but it would be interesting. I don't know if that's is that a non-answer?
No, I think it's a thorough answer, which is what I was hoping for, because what you get a lot of is kind of surface level answers. So no, I don't think there is a clean answer. So I don't think
my children's life is going to be in any way lacking not having social media in it. I think that they will have just as much access to being social and having genuine human relationships and all these things, you know. Yeah, they can still text their friends. They can still get texts from their friends. They can still call their friends. Yeah, I mean,
that's a good answer. Like I said, this is an answer where my opinion is lesser because.
Yeah, but I mean, do you know anybody addicted to this type of media?
I don't.
Because
I
don't. That's
tell.
the other thing is.
That's the thing is I don't know, because that's not something you would. I don't have children, right? So that's the starting point.
But I mean,
children,
adults though. Adults. Do you know adults that are addicted to social media? And the internet?
Well, here again, I think what a professional diagnosis of addiction is might differ. And again, people cover things up in public. There are people who are alcoholics that you never see it when they're out in public.
Functional alcoholics. Yeah.
Right. They come out, they have a couple drinks in public, and then they drink the rest of the night at home alone. Now, so if I see somebody looking at their phone a couple of times in a restaurant or in a social setting, and I see people who look at their phones a lot in social settings, so does that mean they go home and now they're just glued to it? I don't know.
No, so here's the thing, right? So my wife and I would go out like on like, we used to have date nights, right? We'd get like a babysitter or like our parents would watch the kids. Someone would go out, right? And both of us throughout the night would look at our phones just for a moment, because we were always waiting for something to go wrong. right? So I know that very often I'll see other parents do this, where they'll be sitting there talking to you, and they'll just casually look at their phone, and they're not looking at the time. I mean, maybe they might be looking at the time because they're worried, I gotta get home soon or some shit like that. But no, I find that if people are out and they're sitting there kind of half talking to you and they're looking at their phones, I feel like that's a problem.
Well, here's a problem here's something that to me is a possible signal.
Yeah.
But again, this different people do different things, so I don't want to make this a blanket statement. But one thing that most people will tell me they do that I don't even think about doing is they're like, oh, my phone's always on silent. And I'm like, my phone's never on silent because I can just ignore it. So I hear a ding or whatever, and I don't
always on
have
silent.
to look at it.
My phone is always on silent because I don't want to get interrupted by the shrill noise. Plus,
okay, we'll see. There you go.
Plus, I have one phrase that will spell out to you exactly why. Everyone. Do you remember how much trouble I got into?
Got it. Yeah. No,
I got it. There you go.
I got it.
There you go. Yes. I used to not silence my ringer. And I used to have a really unique ringer because I had a flip phone for a while there. I could record any sound I wanted. That was the coolest thing. And my ringer was fucking Gary Oldman saying everyone.
Well, I do have. That's the other thing is I have customized ringtones and ringers for everything.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. Yeah. But I had that
know
ringer
what all them are,
and it wasn't silenced.
Also, when I hear a phone notification, I do not have the impulse to grab my phone. I just don't have it.
Well, I know. We were trying to avoid an ex-girlfriend of mine, and we didn't realize that she was quite as tracky as she was. I don't know what's the word you'd use for her.
The stalkery?
Yeah, I hate to admit this, but like I kind of find the stalkery thing, like light stalking, to be kind of sexy. I don't know why.
So we'll say.
I like people. You know what? And I think what it is, I like people who take an interest.
Let's say as
when you're younger,
not as static.
So when you're younger and someone is like light stalkery, not like kill your pets, but like just kind of like
but cares about what you're doing. You're like, oh, I matter to somebody.
But
there is an element of I matter to somebody in the world at least.
Yeah, and this was an ex-girlfriend, and we were trying to avoid her. There was a group of us, and I knew that she was around, and I was like, oh, I don't want to get sucked into this, and she showed up at my friend's house, and we walked into his house, and we heard her voice from the living room, and we were in the kitchen, and it was like something out of a movie where all of us, like, we all came through the door,
he told me this,
and then we all turned to try to get out at once,
and then your goddamn phone gave it away,
and she knew the ringer, and I was like, shit, and that changed the whole trajectory for that weekend. Ever since then, I always keep my phone on silent mode. I'll just let the fucker vibrate. I'll let it vibrate, take a look at it, and so much less trouble from that.
But many of the people who I know who do that say that is because if they hear it, they'll have to look at it. I'm like, all right, that's a beginning point. If you can't resist the need to look.
Yeah, I mean, listen,
I'm not saying it's addiction. I'm saying that's a beginning point where I'm like, okay.
You know what I hate?
I don't know what's going on
the
after
fact that we get so many goddamn texts about so much bullshit.
Yeah, there should be and there probably is a paid filtering service.
Yeah,
that's a whitelisting thing. You can just put in numbers, but
I find myself like constantly just because normally you can say stop and they'll stop, but there's a bunch that I've said stop to and they still send me things. They're like, hey, don't you know about our sales and this and that and blah 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 blah. And you've got a package. You want to know where your package is? Click this link.
Well, all the political ones, they just shift numbers. Yeah, that's what I mean about there are ways that you could whitelist it, but then if there is like somebody changes their number because something happened, and then you can't get text from them, that's not necessarily good either. So there's no good solution to that. No, I agree. It's not ideal.
But I'm gonna change directions here on you here because I honestly had never intended to talk about any of this shit.
I'm sure.
I was going to bring up the fact that I finally watched Beetlejuice.
Mm-hmm.
And you reviewed it, so we don't need to review it. I did enjoy it though. I found it very enjoyable.
No. I did not.
Yeah.
I did not review it.
Yeah,
I haven't seen it.
I thought. Oh, you haven't seen? I thought you did.
No, I haven't seen it.
Oh shit. Oh, should I review it then?
I don't care. I've read the entire story.
You know what? Then I found it really enjoyable. You know what? I'm going to tell you. This I think should sum it up for you. I found it enjoyable enough that when Delia died, I was really bummed.
Yeah.
And like, I'm still really bummed about it. Because I'm like, oh. And like, it's bittersweet because she's reunited with her dead husband and they go to the great beyond together, right? So like, it's kind of bittersweet.
Okay, wait a minute. So do they show him in full then?
Oh yeah, he's bitten by a shark. So you know how everyone
Well,
looks
no, right.
like
I know for most of the movie he's half a body.
No. You never see the top of him. He is just a.
All right, I was going to say
he is just
a
set of shoulders and like a lower body walking around.
So even at the point of reuniting, he's
he's just a giant bloody hole.
All right,
a shark bite, and you hear a muffled voice, and that's it.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
Oh yeah, it's very funny. It's hilarious.
All right, checking.
But when Delia died, I was and like she dies in a really dumb way. She's doing this ceremony of dedication to her dead husband at his grave, and she gets these snakes, and she tells the granddaughter, "Oh, these have been defanged. You know, these are fine." And then when she opens the box, they come out and they just fucking nail her, and she's dead. And I was really bummed when she died, and I realized that that's probably some level when you are engaged enough in the movie that a character dies and you're like genuinely bummed out, that means you were involved, right? Yeah, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it quite a bit. I thought that you know what it reminded me of? Do you remember the Beetlejuice cartoon series?
I own it. I bought it.
Okay. And you remember how weird it is?
Yes, it's fantastic. It's better than the movie.
Yes, it smacks of that weirdness.
Yeah, I like the clip of him from when he was, how he became it. And it's all old Italian like horror movie stuff.
Yeah. Okay, the music, when they change him, when he changes his voice to other things, it's very funny. Like when he tells you his backstory, but he tells it in another language. And the musical numbers are actually quite funny the way they do them. I think they go on maybe slightly too long, but I thought they were quite funny. But it reminds me of that cartoon because when you see Beetlejuice, he basically is working as a manager in one of the areas of the afterlife, right? There are undead police officers. Willem Dafoe is an actor who basically becomes an undead...
Played a cop and then became a cop.
And becomes a dead cop who basically tries to keep things functioning, right? I mean, there's a whole underworld of shit going on that is absurd. So it reminded me of the show. I was like, oh man, I loved that cartoon. It was so fucking weird. So the second that kind of got set off in me, I was like, okay, I am enjoying this. It's like I'm enjoying this quite a bit. Is it a perfect movie? No. But I found it really enjoyable. I liked the things that they did. I like that they tried a few little new things here and there. There's some things that harken back. There's some things I didn't understand though. Like, for example, if you can marry a dead person and bring them back from the dead, right? Which is what Beetlejuice wants. Why doesn't what's her name? Oh God, the daughter. Jeez, I can't remember. I'm going to call her Winona Ryder. Lydia. Why doesn't Lydia just marry her dead husband and bring him back to life? Or because they were already married, she can't marry him again?
Sure.
Or like,
every
why didn't she marry?
Its own rules, I guess.
Yeah. Or why didn't she marry her mother and bring her mother back from the dead? Like, what are the rules of that, right? Like it's kind of a weird thing. But either way, but I did enjoy it. I thought that there are a lot of people who complain that like, oh, Beetlejuice is old. I'm like, yeah, he looks older, but you know what? He always looked haggard. Like the second I got kind of used to it, I enjoyed Beetlejuice more in this. They gave him more to do. Like he's running around a bit. He's not necessarily all bad, which I like because in the last movie like he was kind of the bad thing, whereas in this one like he's not really as bad as anything else. I mean I thought it had a dumb ending. That was the one thing for me. It's not that the ending, it's that they tried to end it on kind of a weird ending. And I was like, oh, I would have liked to have something a bit less silly. They went for like a silly ending, I think is really what it was. And this is like after the movie is formally over. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought it was good. And I was just genuinely bummed when Delia died. And it was just because like her character, I feel like her character evolved quite a bit from the first movie. and she was still nuts, but she was somewhat more of a voice of reason, because the way they portrayed Lydia, which I actually think works, is that she's unsure of herself. She's kind of depressed. This is exactly what Lydia would have grown up into. She has a ghost show. She can see the dead. She's turned it into a TV show. But she's still not happy with her life, and she's very nervous, and she's easy to kind of manipulate. And you're kind of like, yeah, this feels like pretty human, really. Like it doesn't. I think read somewhere that people didn't like the way necessarily Lydia was portrayed. That why wouldn't she become something more headstrong or something like that? And I'm like, I don't know. I was like, this is like she was a depressed, lonely kid, goth. Doesn't really surprise me that she'd grow up into a kind of a depressed, lonely woman. So I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it quite a bit. I think I would rewatch both, because we rewatched Beetlejuice and them a couple years ago, and I was kind of introducing my kids to it. My kids were excited enough about it; they wanted to see the new one. And I would. This is they honestly they asked me when the next one was going to come out. That's like their highest mark for me, when they're like, "Is there a sequel?"
Oh, well,
and I'm like, guys, I don't know. I don't know if there will be, only because it took 30 years to make this one.
No, I think it will be. I think
they'll make another?
I think it did. I think it did well enough. Yeah, I think so.
Weird. I don't know if I want a sequel, and I don't mean that in a negative way.
I mean, whether you want one or not is a completely different thing.
But I know, but you know what I mean.
Oh no, it quadrupled its budget. So
really?
Yeah, the budget was $100 million. Box office was $434.
Yeah, we'll see.
So
we'll see.
My
we'll see if they make another
suspicion
one.
is
The only weird thing for me is the girl who plays.
Oh no, you know what? I'm sorry. This is the original attempt at the sequel. They said that's 2019. Never mind. Sorry. Let me go to this and see if they've announced it.
Is it Jenna Ortega who plays the granddaughter?
Yeah.
Or Lydia's daughter. So that's Wednesday Addams, right? She's Wednesday in the Wednesday show. So what's really funny is that in the Wednesday show, she falls in love with a boy who turns out to be the monster of the series, right? Who tries to kill her. In this, she falls in love with a boy who turns out to be a ghost and tries to kill her. And I'm kind of like, okay, a little bit of typecasting here. Be careful, dear. Yeah. And I like that she's not just another Lydia. I like that that she's a new character, that she's got kind of her own perspective on things. She thinks the whole ghost thing is bullshit. But she's not just like a goth. Like they didn't just make like another version of Lydia out of her, which they easily could have, because she already plays Wednesday, so that's what people wanted. She's very smart. She's very independent. She's very headstrong. I almost see like kind of bits of Lydia and her the mother and the grandmother in the character, right? So yeah,
well, let's put it this way: all the stories are about how much money it's making. Therefore, I suspect the sequel will happen in some form.
And the thing is, like, because this movie took so long to make, and because it is such a kind of a weird birth, like, I don't want another one to be made easy. Do you know what I mean? I think the fact that this was so difficult to make happen.
Yeah, but I think a lot of that was because the ideas were really stupid.
Were they?
The thing about the joke about it being set in Hawaii, that's not a joke. They were going to set it in Hawaii. And if doesn't sound like the dumbest, it was going to be like
was there a
goes
reason
Hawaiian.
for it? Was there a reason for it to be set in Hawaii?
Well, I mean, from what I read, it was a terrible idea, but this was a sequelitis type of thing where they were like, we have to bring it back somehow. So
yeah, I mean, listen, the fact that it starts with the father dying.
Well, here's the thing about it, right?
Yeah.
Which actually, let me look at one thing. There's one thing I wasn't sure about. Let me check the actual specs on this. Okay, so are these the people who wrote the original? Who wrote the original?
I don't think they are.
Well, there's 3 writers.
Yeah.
There's 3 credited writers. So let me look at the original. The original. Come on, IMDb. You're supposed to be the greatest. Okay, wait. It looks like 2 of them are. Hold on.
Oh,
I'm gonna
really?
double check that.
Oh, that surprises
me. Looks like
me.
2 of the 3. I could be wrong.
Did they have
Michael
anything
McDowell
to do...
and Larry Wilson are the 2 who look like they came back. Yes, Michael McDowell wrote Beetlejuice, The Nightmare Before Christmas, and the sequel, as well as some Tales from the Crypt episodes. So far, that's all good. Amazing stories. Alfred Hitchcock presents. Okay, this is not a nobody. Larry Wilson wrote the original, The Addams Family, the first movie, which is a great film.
Yeah,
Tales from the Crypt. Okay, I'm starting to see a pattern, which is people who write creepy shit that has an edge of humor, which is good. Okay, so those two were involved in this one. The third one is the new one. Alfred Goff, who wrote the Smallville TV series, the Wednesday TV series.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, right. We're starting to see it, right? So this is all good. So these are the people who were involved, along with the original cast members, for the most part, those who weren't pedophiles. And so the fact that it got made now and wasn't a train wreck means that doing a speedy third one might not be bad if you get all these people back again. Yeah, and like which they probably would because they made money.
It's not that the movie's perfect. It
no, but in other words, that's why not waiting might be better because these people seem to get it.
They have this team.
They get it enough. You want to keep people like this.
Yeah, but the problem is if you do a movie now, it's really only going to be Lydia and her daughter and Beetlejuice to some degree. So like you're kind of sitting there going, okay, well, you're only really getting some of the original cast back.
Yeah, but the foundational ones will be there, meaning also Tim Burton. So.
Oh yes, of course, yeah. So I just don't know where they would go because it ends in such a way where like you kind of have hope for the characters.
Well, they would finish all their stories out. I mean, ideally, everybody gets a wrap up, a full wrap up, as opposed to her having these visions that Beetlejuice is still around.
Yeah, so that's how it ends. Yeah, she has these dreams that he's still around. Yeah,
it's not totally.
And the thing is,
resolved.
listen, he's going to be around because he's a demon that isn't going to die. He's already dead, so he has time to wait her out.
Yeah. And, well, that's the thing is, so there's a way to finish.
And
it
honestly,
out.
like the Bob character with the shrunken head.
Yeah, the Bobs.
Yeah, the Bobs. Honestly, that character was so clever because my kids were absolutely. Like, I was sad when Delia got it, but when the Bob got killed, my kids were like so crestfallen by that. They're like, "Not Bob. Bob is so nice. Why would you kill Bob?" Ones.
It's okay.
Well, the rest of them, I love when the rest of them get out of the underworld. That's very funny.
So it's kind of like a minion.
Oh,
like,
and the guy from
okay.
Torchwood is the priest in this. Yeah, the undead zombie.
I saw that. Yeah,
I was like, holy shit, that guy pops
great
up.
casting.
That guy pops up in the weirdest shit.
He shows up in strange places. Yes, he does.
Yeah, it's a weird arc to his career. I gotta say. So like I said, it's not a perfect movie, but I found it very enjoyable. And the more it reminded me of the cartoon, and the more I was like, okay, I'm really starting to dig this.
Oh,
and like,
hold on, I just noticed something.
200 hours later.
We have passed the 2-hour mark, which I will now play that sound every time I notice it. Go on.
The more it was like the cartoon, the more I enjoyed it because the cartoon was so fucking weird, and that was like a gross, a kind of self-centered but funny Beetlejuice, and like he genuinely had there was a lot of. He genuinely liked Lydia, and he watched out for her, and they had all these weird fucking adventures. And it was like a Saturday morning cartoon, but it was like the world of the dead and all the weird shit therein. And
it's a great cartoon. It's really good.
I realized that I missed that, and the more of that I got, because some of the shit is like when the Soul Train shows up, it literally turns into Solid Gold dancers.
Right.
Where they're all dancing and there are all these people with froze and like the Soul Train. Like, and it's so dumb, and yet it works so perfectly. Yeah. So like, like if they made a sequel, would I watch it? Yeah, I would. Would I have a lot of reservations whether it was going to be good? Yeah, sure.
Well, didn't you have a lot about this one when you first heard it?
What's that? Yes. Oh, yeah. When I heard I had a lot of reservations whether it was going to be good. But you know what? When I saw the trailer, I thought Michael Keaton looked good. I was like, I didn't have an issue with the haggard.
He was the one part I was sure wouldn't be bad. It was everything else I was concerned about. I mean,
and
Tim
honestly,
Burton hasn't exactly been riding hit after hit after hit. Come on.
Yeah. And all the weird shit they did, where he starts like there's a lot of weird musical shit that happens. He throws his voice around, the whole thing where he tells his backstory in another language.
The baby version.
Turns into like it's just it had fun, and it was fun to watch. And did it change my outlook on the world? No, but it was fun. and I enjoyed it. And Willem Dafoe was like very invested in his weird ass fucking role. And Monica Bellucci was creepy. There's a great sequence where she put
typically invested in almost all his roles these days.
I know, and that's what's great about him is that
he doesn't really do half roles.
He is there no matter what. Yeah. And I didn't feel like anybody was phoning it in. That's the other thing too. Like everybody involved is fully involved. And I can say it's one of the things with Tim Burton movies. Like not all Tim Burton movies are good. He's made a lot of movies that are very iffy. But I never get the sense that people who are working on these movies don't give a shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it never feels like nobody cares.
Yeah, like if you're invested in this kind of weird, you kind of have to be invested in this kind of weird.
Yeah, I'd say that's accurate. Yeah.
So yeah, it was good. I loved it. I had a really good time. Watched it with the kids. They had a really good time. They want to know when the sequel's coming out. Because that's where they live. You want to talk about the difference between adults like me and my kids. I come from the land of, well, we might see a sequel in 3 years. Whereas they're like, oh, the sequel's coming out in a year. And you're like, what? Or, was it Slow Horses? They're filming that whole show back to back.
Yeah.
And so, like, you get to the end of the series and you're like, oh, it's over. And then there's a trailer at the end for the next series because they've already got the trailer ready for it. And you're like, oh, okay.
Well, sometimes they know what they've got. And they're like, all right, we're going to keep this going as long as these people are willing to do it.
Did I review that at all? The end of that when I finished it? I think I did.
Yeah, I think it did.
I did. Sure. Hugo Weaving is amazing. Yeah, I can't. Yeah, God. And I just found out that he might come back, and I'm like, oh, Jesus, I hope he comes back. Because Hugo
that's
Weaving
probably why they're filming it fast because they're like, all right, we got him. Let's keep him.
Oh yeah, we've got him.
Because
in an interview he said that he was interested in doing more of it because he found the character fun. And it's like, yeah, like his character.
Well, that's what I'm saying is when you get to the end of filming, if everybody's like, yeah, we'll keep doing this, you're like, all right, let's start it back up.
I didn't know that I needed Gary Oldman and Hugo Weaving in a series together. And the fact that there are no scenes in that show that the two of them are in a room together, I need that at some point.
That's going to be next season.
I need those two in a room together at some point because they are
It'll happen.
The two of them are the contrary spy fathers of the main character of that show.
It's going to be the Heat thing where it's going to be where they're going to have to sit down and you know what's going to happen.
Yes, I hope so.
Because, that's that whole movie is you sit there and go, when is this going to happen? It's got to happen. And then it happens. You're like, yep, it's everything we thought.
Hugo Weaving. That's an actor that I would love to see in a Tim Burton movie. Because he hasn't been in it, has he?
No, not that I remember.
Yeah, like, that's one of those people. I'd like to see what kind of weird...
Unless it was a bit part, but I don't think so.
A really bit role, yeah.
But I'm going to say no. I don't think so.
Oddly, if you were like... If they were going to... I don't want them this, but if you were going to recast Beetlejuice because you wanted to like do like a young, like show him young or something like that, oddly, I hope they don't. But oddly, I could see Matt Smith as Beetlejuice.
No, I can't. But I'm not the big Matt Smith fan as you are.
No. I just think he's
would I
weird
cast as
enough.
A young Beetlejuice.
Yeah, not for a whole movie, but instead of doing a CG. Like young Harrison Ford, like they did in the last Indiana Jones.
Well,
right?
Matt Berry is probably too old.
Oh, God. No, you don't. Listen, Matt Berry doesn't need to be Beetlejuice. He needs to be some other. Honestly, make the next movie where another demon is trying to fuck Beetlejuice.
Oh, he should be the rival bioexorcist. Wouldn't that be something?
Yes, come on. That'd be fantastic.
Yeah.
Because Matt Berry is the only person I could see putting up.
Who can hold up?
Against Beetlejuice.
Yeah, that's your Hugo Weaving, Gary Oldman pairing right there.
Yes, right there, that moment.
Yeah.
So, young. Because the thing is, now they just want to de-age everybody. But there was a time when they just would cast a young version. Like I just watched that show Old Man with Jeff Bridges and oh God, what's his name? I don't even remember the guy's name now. It's terrible.
Lithgow,
yeah, and Lithgow and Bridges, and they're fantastic in that. And they half the show is showing the shit that happened when they were young in the 80s in Afghanistan. It's a young Lithgow and it's young Bridges.
You know what?
And the guy,
I'll tell you who would be a good young Beetlejuice, maybe.
Yeah.
The guy from Lower Decks who was in the live action one, too. What's that guy's name?
Oh.
He seems to have that kind of...
Dennis Quaid's son? Jack Quaid?
Jack Quaid? He kind of seems to have that energy. He might be able to do it. He can do comedy.
Interesting.
I don't know, but he seems to have the face for it.
Yeah, he can be
I could
absurd.
Sort of picture it right away. Like the makeup on him would sort of look right.
That's funny. No, man, I didn't even think about that, but it does work. And he can do comedy really well.
Well, I was trying to think of young actors who kind of have a somewhat frenetic, natural face.
Yeah.
Because you kind of have to have that, you know.
Yeah, I think a lot of people forget that Michael Keaton started in comedy.
Oh, absolutely they do. Yeah.
Yeah, because he's really good at drama.
Yeah, he is.
Oh, well, anyway, now that I've destroyed our time frame, what have you got?
Well, you already know what I'm going to be reviewing because I told you about it. But I took a chance because I saw the trailers for the Hellboy film, the new one.
Oh,
Yeah, The Crooked Man.
I had forgotten.
And I had read some very, very divisive reviews. A lot of ones, a lot of tens. And I went, okay, obviously the Del Toro films are their own thing. It's just, I actually think it was smart not to try to go that big. I think and by the way,
he skewed away from the comics, and that was his own version of them.
Well, no, apparently this is apparently a comic story. This is apparently a well-known comic story, but
no.
They didn't try to replicate the Mignola look.
Yeah, Del Toro skewed away from the comics to create his own version.
Ironically,
this is closer to the comics.
Del Toro took all the visuals without necessarily doing the stories, but all the bright kind of harsh blacks and color and all that stuff, he took that part of it and then did a more fantasy kind of horror thing or whatever you want to call it. I don't know. He did his own thing, which he usually does.
Well, yeah, but here's the thing. When you see the Hellboy movies, they almost feel like they're in the same world as Pan's Labyrinth.
Well, they do, but they also, at times they are doing comic panels. With the way that, because he's good at light and dark. It makes sense.
Oh, yeah.
But there's a very, very stylized thing going on there. And plus, Del Toro is very made for monsters. That's his whole thing.
Oh, yeah, and his monsters are
lush, rich visual language that he uses.
Here's the thing. Watching Del Toro's Hellboy, right? And then watching the David Harbour Hellboy, which has moments that are very good in a lot of moments that are very shitty.
That's the problem.
You're like, oh, God damn it.
Well, because I felt like that movie was trying to match what came before. They were trying to just keep going.
They wanted to be big. They kept wanting the stories to be big.
Yes, right.
And you're like,
so
they don't have to be big stories all the time. Some of the best stories are small.
Correct.
And
so this movie had a much lower budget, and instead of being stupid and trying to do something big with a small budget, and it's, by the way, the guy who did the Ghost Rider sequel, ironically enough, did this movie. Ghost Rider Spirit of Vengeance. This is the director.
Which I still haven't watched, but my kids definitely want to see it, so I'm stuck.
I know you'll see it. So this movie instead went with a much more dialed-in story. The main villain is a local villain. He really only haunts this small part of Appalachia. That's it.
His territory.
He's only known locally. Huh?
It's his territory.
Yeah, exactly. But it's like a county. It's like a hillside county somewhere. I don't even know if it's named. I know the year is 1959. I don't think they ever say where they are. But you understand that it's probably in the south or someplace up in the mountains. Like, it's away from civilization. And so this villain is only really terrorizing whatever the size of this county is, which does not seem to be particularly big. So they scaled down the story to fit what the budget was, and also I think to smartly not try to replicate the night market thing that, the monster market or whatever it was called, where you would have to spend a ton of money on elaborate costumes, big world-ending threats, a giant fungus monster, that kind of, all that stuff was never going to be possible in this. So we start out, and again, set in 1959.
But to be fair, in the comic, you didn't always get that.
And that's why I think I'm fine with it. This is a plus. I think this is a good thing. It's smart to say, okay.
Hellboy was very often the only weird element to the stories.
Yeah, and that's, well, more or less the case. He's the only weird element except for the villain. But so we start off and we're on a train, and it's Hellboy and a female researcher from the BPRD named Joe something. I don't even know if they say her last name, but her first name's Joe. And then we have the normal male agent. Remember the guy from the first movie?
Yeah, the point of view
whatever
character
his name
that
was?
they brought in.
Exactly. So we have these three in the train car, and the first thing Hellboy really says is, why do we need him here? And he's like, well, I'm here to make sure that the cargo gets back safely. And the cargo in this case is some kind of demon spider in a box. And as the train's going along, Hellboy starts hearing this noise, and he's the only one that's hearing it. And this spider starts getting agitated and, of course, breaks out of the box. So we get our first kind of action sequence where the spider breaks out and immediately kills the normal guy, which I thought was hysterical and perfect. So he's dead in under 5 minutes into the film. His head has been exploded by the spider. So it was perfect because at first I'm like, oh, man, really? We're going to have one of these guys again, the thing that they did in the first movie? Because I think that was the joke, was, no, we're not going to do that again. We understand that you know who Hellboy is. We don't have to explain his origin. We don't have to have a normal person who will ask dumb questions, because that's really what these characters serve in these
the
movies.
audience. It's the audience.
Audience
hey,
surrogate.
Who's that? Yeah. What's this? Explain it to me. Like I'm an idiot. Yeah.
Well, and the thing is, his line, too, is... it so sets you up to think he's that, because he's like, I'm here to make sure that the cargo makes it back and to make sure that this pretty lady gets back without a scratch. And you're like, oh, God, this is going to be like a love triangle. They're going to do the same dumb shit. Yeah. And then the spider breaks out.
That's probably for me, that is one of the weakest things.
Yeah. And so the spider blows...
it's not in sync with the comic at all.
No, it's terrible. And so I thought, oh, this is a bad sign. Then the spider literally chomps his entire head off in a gush of gore, and his head is demolished. He's dead before they're off the train. Literally, I think he's dead by minute 3. So they come off the train, and there's a long sequence where Hellboy's kind of fighting the spider, and as they fight it, which I like, the spider as he's beating on it, it's getting smaller and smaller and smaller until it's basically a normal spider, and then he basically just crushes it. So its power was in the fear that they had of it, and as he's pounding on it and kind of reducing it, it's also reducing until it's just a little spider on its back, and then he squishes it. And then we get so now they're off the train. The train's derailed. Everybody's dead but them. And I don't have a lot of clips from this movie, but I wanted to get a bunch so you could hear his voice as Hellboy and kind of some of the dialogue, because I think it actually works really well. So this is their kind of first real exchange after they've just had this train wreck, and now they've realized that they're kind of stuck out here.
Joe?
Okay.
Field work, huh? It's not much like research, is it?
Just don't get it. Spider, what made it go crazy like that?
Something in these hills. Trees. And the dirt. Something haunted. Evil. This place has the stink.
Smell pine needles?
Underneath that, Joe. Madness. Death. Called out to Daddy Longlegs. Woke him up.
How do you know that?
Dark things called the dark things. I heard it too.
We're so screwed.
Screwed, chewed, and tattooed.
We need to find a phone. We need to call this in.
My only real complaint about his performance early on is, for some reason, and I have to think that this is something the director wanted.
Yeah.
For a while, every time they cut to him speaking, he is taking a drag from a cigarette in a very pronounced way, which I think they thought would look moody, but it just looks weird because they're doing it so often, and then they kind of drop it.
This scene has really opened a question up to me that I realized I never asked, but now I must ask it because I think it is important.
Yeah.
It never occurred to me what Hellboy should sound like until I heard him speak, because naturally you get an American to do the role, right? Because, it's American movies, right? But he was raised by a British scientist. So it's very possible that and he was summoned by Rasputin, right? So it doesn't make sense that he would sound like anything specific. He doesn't need to be American. I mean, like, Ron Perlman plays him American because he's American, right? And David Harbour plays him American because that's how Ron Perlman played him. But there's something interesting about this guy's diction, how he pronounces the word. There's almost something. It's like I don't know if he's like this to the whole movie, but there's almost something a little European to how. I mean, is the actor American?
I don't know. Hold on, let's see.
Because I'd be curious.
I've never heard of him, so I don't know. Let's take a look.
If he was doing an American accent, because I like the way he sounds not quite, American.
No, he is a New Yorker.
Oh, is he really?
He is a born and bred New Yorker. Yep.
Wow, yeah, because like the way he's pronunciating, there is something different. And I don't know if he did that on purpose, but there is something about the way he raps it, and like
I
times,
like it.
Yeah, it is interesting. And I like the music. I like the way they're just mooting their way through it.
Well, that's the thing is the movie has a very specific tone, which does feel like this is a folk horror film, which is what I like about it. It has a very kind of, there's a lot of that like heavy, like guitar, like toning of things, and you'll hear other bits of it. But it's a relatively simple soundtrack, but it is.
No, it's how we were talking about how there was an age where a soundtrack was just there to support the movie, but now they've become their own thing.
Yes.
This is a soundtrack that's just there to support the movie.
Right. And so the thing too is a lot of the colors, and I think this might have irritated people too if they're comparing. Is it's a lot of muted colors except for him. Most of the colors are a muted palette, so it's not. That sounds
like the
colorful.
comic.
Well, right, and so he stands out because he's very red, and he is supposed. I love the hair. They really got his hair, his facial hair, really really right for what I remember from the comic. And the only thing, and I told you this is because we discussed a little bit. The only thing I think they kind of messed up on is I feel like those horns should have been about half the size. Which I know in the comics they're large, but on the actor they look a little silly because they're so big. And I think if they'd been a little bit smaller and a little bit more recessed, they would have been more natural looking. Doesn't matter.
I like them.
Well, there you go. That's what I was going to say. It's not enough that I care, but it was the only thing I kept noticing was how big that they were. Because I think the makeup isn't quite as successful there as it is everywhere else.
He does look a little plasticky. That's the issue.
Yeah, that's the thing. Is it?
The Ron Perlman makeup was very natural.
Impeccable. It was impeccable. Yeah, because again,
whereas there is something very plasticky to him. I will admit.
But when they show him, like when he's out of focus, and there are a lot of good out of focus shots of it, then it looks great because you see the profile and it's in like shadow, and he looks fantastic. And he overall looks fantastic.
How's the tail?
It's very good because I think what they did was most of the time it's just a rubber tail that hangs, and you don't notice it really. And there were a few times where I think they either animated or they had it on a string. And it looks fine. I never even noticed it because I kept looking to see if it looked fakey, and it never does. So my guess is that 90% of the time, they probably had it on a belt, and it was just a rubber tail, and they just didn't care what it did. That is fine because it reacts naturally. I never noticed it like being a CG tail. So I have a feeling they just gave him a rubber tail and painted it red. And that's great. I think it was they made the complete right decision
I'm fine with that.
No, again, thinking back to the Ron Perlman makeup, which was beautiful. Beautiful. This is 90% on that level of a different Hellboy, meaning this is supposed to be a young, skinnier, less experienced Hellboy before he's bulked up.
Is it the 50s or the 40s?
59. 59.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So he's relatively young. So for that, but even like the body work, either this guy is in shape and they just sprayed his body, or they did really good work with whatever he's wearing because it never looks fake. You never see it like rippling or bending. The hand has limited mobility, but it does have. The fingers move. And they're smart. They utilize it correctly. Like they know what they can do with it, and they don't try to make it do anything else. There's no animation of the fingers. It only works when it seems. If it's not practical, they made it look practical. It looks to me like they just have limited like the three fingers can move. I don't even know if the thumb could move. You never really see it. But I never noticed it. And if I don't notice it, I don't care. It's fine. Because most of the time it's in a fist and he's punching things. So that's all they needed was one with a fist and probably one where the fingers could move a little bit. And they look fine. Most of the time, if he's articulating, it's with his left hand, which is a normal hand. The gun is a normal looking gun with a big barrel. They didn't over-emphasize it. So that in the comic, of course, he has the giant gun, and in the Del Toro movie he has the giant gun. But other than that, I really don't think there's anything to complain about. And the makeup.
I mean,
it's
still a revolver, though. I mean, that's what it was in the comic. It was a big revolver.
And the fact that it looks this good compared, I mean, I think this looks better than the David Harbour makeup. To be honest, I think it looks a lot better.
I was actually just looking, and there was a photo that compared the David Harbour to this. And honestly, when you look at this against the David Harbour makeup is a bit much.
That's what I'm saying is I think they were smart to strip back and go to simple stuff, as opposed to trying to either overachieve what they couldn't do with the budget or try to match the other movies. They decided to go the other way, and that's fine.
So they're in the woods. They've killed the spider.
Yep, so they're wandering along, and they inevitably arrive at this kind of ramshackle town where, and nobody reacts to him oddly. That's another thing I like, is they don't go, oh, a demon. They don't seem to really notice him at all. They because I think they're used to folk horror, like they're used to witches and demons. Yeah. So he's just one more strange thing, except he's not malicious. And so they come in and they find this kid that's laid out, and he's basically catatonic. And they're, so the researcher, Joe, she says, okay, we have to get him a doctor. And the townspeople then explain why there's no point in calling a doctor.
Now, ain't no doctor gonna do him no good.
Why is that?
'Cause he witched, that's why.
Witched?
Child didn't have no sense. Kept teasing that Cora Fisher. Throwing rocks at her window, leaving dead things for her to find. Told him he better stay away from her. Everyone knows Cora Fisher be a witch.
You said Cora Fisher?
Tom Farrell, I will be damned.
I ain't dead yet.
Never thought we'd see you around these parts again.
How many years it been, Tom?
A spell, I reckon. Found this in the doorstep.
True. Witch ball. Yeah, I heard of these. Better not.
So what made that mark there, ma'am? You said Cora Fisher did this?
Why, you know her?
I used to. She wasn't a witch back then.
So now we have the kind of beginning of where we're going to go with this, which is there are witches, and the guy, Tom Farrell, who shows up, is familiar with the witch who they're saying did this to this young child. And we're going to get the whole backstory to that, but basically he shows up, and of course, because he knows the witch, Hellboy's kind of like, all right, well, we should probably look into this because, something's going on here. This might be related to what was going on with the spider. And, so they start basically traveling with Tom, and they're looking around because they want to find this witch. And so they come and they get to what I believe is supposed to be Tom's old house, and they're staying in there, and they're kind of looking around. Oh, no, I'm sorry. It wasn't his house. It was the witch's house, Cora, I don't know, Cora Swan, whatever her name was. One of the two witches we'll see in this. And so they go to her house because he wants to find out what happened to her, because he knew her a long time ago before, as he said, she was a witch, and he didn't believe that she would do this to a child, and so he wanted to go and see what was going on. So they find the house, they go into the house, they're looking around, and they see this really strange bug. I don't know, almost like a stag beetle with wings, and they capture it because Tom says, get that thing and put it into a jar, capture it. So they capture it, and they go up to the second floor, and on the second floor there is what looks like a woman's skin that has been discarded. In fact, that is what it is. We'll see it get reanimated later. And so, Hellboy says to...
Oh, is this the raccoon scene?
Yes, that's the raccoon scene. Correct. Yes.
Yeah, that is. I saw a clip of that. That is creepily done.
It's really well done. That's what I'm saying. There's a lot of really well done stuff in this. So they see that, and Joe's like, I don't know what that is. And Tom's like, oh, I know what that is. That's the skin of the witch. That means she's out somewhere, and she'll be coming back. At which point, Hellboy says, okay, you seem to know an awful lot about what's going on here, so why don't you tell us what's going on here? Now, this is a pretty long clip, but this is the meat of the story. So this is really the foundation of everything, because this is kind of, he's going to explain his backstory, and this explains the Crooked Man, and why he was gone for a while, and why he knows what's going on.
A demon familiar, I expect.
I hate those.
They feed on the witch they're attached to.
They feed off each other. The witch, the animal. According to the lore, they function as symbiotic parasites.
The lore. The Lord have mercy. My mother was a witch. I bet they left that little detail out in your magazine, huh, Tom? I never met my mother. Never wanted to. In fact, everything I ever knew about witches, I wish I didn't. On the way up here, you mentioned you saw the devil.
Some 15 years ago, about a mile from this very spot, I come upon a stream, and there she was. No, not the devil. Close enough. Her name was Effie Cole. I knew right off. She was trouble. And I'm ashamed to say, I forgot all about poor old Cora Fisher after that. You see, Effie, she was a witch. And she got me all twisted up, thinking maybe I ought to be a witch too. And all that talk about having power over other folks made it sound real good. Yeah. So I went out and I got me a dead black cat. When my mom was out, I boiled it on the stovetop till it went all to pieces. Took that mess down to the creek, clean off the bones. Effie told me whatever bone I was holding when the devil showed up, that was gonna be my lucky bone.
So arbitrary.
I knew him right off. Yeah, I have tales about him all my life. Mr. Anselm, some of the old folks called him. Most just called him the Crooked Man.
Crooked Man. Ooh.
The story goes, Mr. Anselm was one of the first white men came here from Europe hundreds of years ago. He played both sides in the war between the states. Came to be a very rich man.
Sounds like a real clever one. How would that work out for him?
They say heaven don't have much room for rich folks. They got plenty down there. They send him back up to claim souls instead of legal tender. They say he takes a copper penny for every soul he claims from the devil. If he gets enough of them, one day he'll be rich again. One look at old Mr. Anselm scared all them witchy thoughts right out of me. Got lit off for home, swearing the whole way to be good again. I even took that lucky bone, threw it as far as I could. Somehow I never could be rid of it. I was so scared when I got home, I just kept right on running. Guess that's how I wound up in the army. But I come through it. Got a scratch. It ain't 'cause I was born lucky. Smart. Tough. Quite the opposite.
And that's the backstory of Tom, where he was trying to become a witch. And basically, it's the whole thing where once you start that path, you can't really get rid of it. So you see all these things, and he kind of alluded to it, that every time he'd try to get rid of the bone, it would keep coming back. It would show back up.
You know, you want to know what's really hilarious, by the way?
Sure.
I'm watching, and on silent mode, a thing that shows the visuals from the comic that they're pulling off of the Crooked Man story, right? And the exact moment that motherfucker says, "My lucky bone," the panel comes up on the screen that says Tom's lucky bone at like the exact same moment.
Yeah. Is it like glowing on the end? Is it a little bone with a glow?
No. It was just the chapter heading for talking about it.
Oh, got it.
Showing the visuals.
And there are chapter breaks in this, like the comics. So it shows like a picture of the witch ball. It says witch ball, and it keeps going.
Yeah, so, it was just very funny because right as he said "my lucky bone" on the screen, it was like Tom's lucky bone.
Yeah.
So anyway, go on.
So, and when he said the thing about my mother was a witch, I looked it up, and that is from the comic, because I didn't remember that. I remembered the Del Toro origin, which is not the comic. The comic, he is the son of a witch. So I was like, oh, they stuck to the comic with that. That is his actual origin. He is the son of a witch. So this is very, very from the comic. So that's the basic villain now, is the Crooked Man. And shortly thereafter, the raccoon scene happens, which is that body being re-inhabited by the witch Cora Fisher. That was the name, not Swan Fisher. And then immediately, the only really questionable actor of the film shows up, which is Nympho Witch. Nympho Witch is really overdoing it.
Is she blonde and she's coming in on a horse?
Yes.
Jesus, right as you said Nympho Witch, there was a picture here on the screen. Man, it's almost like this thing is weirdly synced up with you. Go on.
Yeah. And she's very 90210 bad actress of the week type. So that's the one place where I would say, yeah, you're going to notice that performance because it's way too much. Way overdoing it. But she comes in and basically says, "Oh, Tom, yeah, you remember when you and I used to fool around? Haha, Nympho Witch." And she's riding a horse, and he's like, "Go away. You could take me instead of Cora," because apparently Cora has also promised her soul to the Crooked Man. And she's like, "No, that's not how it works." And he's like, "Well, I don't want anything to do with you or him, and I'm going to, I'll find a way to beat you both," or some effect of that. And she's like, "Yeah, sure you will. Okay. Well, it was nice seeing you in here. I'm going to leave this horse for you because I'm sure you're familiar with who he is." And the horse transforms into his father, who she's been basically slowly torturing to death as she rode him as a horse. And his father, Tom's father, dies in his arms. And so he says, "Okay, we have to take my father to a church and bury him there because in consecrated ground they can't claim his soul after he's dead." So they make their way to a church, and it's basically now it's Hellboy, Joe, Tom, and Cora Fisher. And Cora Fisher is clearly not thrilled to be a witch, but also is kind of under the possession of it still. So there's parts where she's kind of flipping out, and then a snake emerges from her body and then goes into her body and then fights Hellboy, and he manages to defeat it. And that by killing the snake, she gets banished into another realm. I think it was. Wasn't quite sure what was going on, but there's a point where, as Hellboy sees this vision of this woman and his mother burning, and he figures out, okay, they're trying to torture me here. They're trying to get inside my head by showing me what they're making me try to think is my mother. And so Tom's like, "Yeah, we have to get to the church because if we stay out here, then we're gonna, the witch is going to come back. They have their power out here." So they show up at this church, and they run into a blind preacher who is the reverend of the church. And this is a bit of exposition on kind of the reverend saying, "Oh, you're screwed. You made a deal with the devil, so the devil's going to come for you." And Hellboy saying, "Yeah, maybe we can take him on." The reverend saying, "I don't think so."
That you, Tom Farrell?
How'd you know, Reverend?
She told me.
She?
There's a girl here.
Come in a couple of minutes for you fellas, bold as breath.
You don't see her? Well, maybe she a ghost.
Is it Cora Fisher?
Cora Fisher? Yep. Remember her when she was just a little tadpole. Devil might have got a body, but he didn't get her soul. It's your daddy, ain't it?
Figured he ought to be buried in proper church ground.
So he should. But I think you got another purpose for being up here on the hurricane, don't you?
Yes, sir. We aim to go up that hill.
You going to his house? Now, why'd any damn fool want to do a thing like that for?
My daddy's dead. Cora, you're dead. I'm sorry, girl. Maybe all that's left to do is surrender myself to him. Tell him, take my body, take my soul, take your goddamn penny. Just so long as there's no more killing on my conscience. And after all, a deal's a deal, ain't it?
That's ridiculous. You were just a kid. A deal with a demonic entity? How can that possibly be binding?
Oh, it be binding.
Hellboy.
Yeah, it's kind of binding. Well, look, there may be some wiggle room. That's what I'm here for. To renegotiate.
Negotiate my ass.
Well, he do seem like a pretty persuasive fella, Reverend, don't he?
Men's pride and folly, all that is. Well, if you're gonna go, best do it when the sun's up in the sky. His power's strongest when it's dark. Y'all stay at night.
We got a boogie-woogie preach. Looks like we still have some daylight left.
You sure about that?
Right after he says that, then everything starts to get dark, and what you figure out is that they are obscuring the sun, and they're basically bringing the night on faster. And so they have to basically stay inside the church because they can't penetrate the church. At least they can't physically come inside. And so what happens instead is the Nympho Witch starts projecting inside and, trying to tempt them to come out and leave the grounds. And she's doing all different stuff. And
I'm looking at panels of the comic as you're playing this dialogue. And I mean, Jesus, it's close. It's close as fuck.
Well, that's what I'm saying is this is, they chose the right story.
They chose the story and they stuck to it. I mean,
yeah, because they really didn't have to do much. Like in terms of effects and everything, the spider in the beginning is CG, but it's a lot in darkness or in blurred, so you don't see much of it. So they don't have to spend much there. Yeah. Hellboy's makeup, as far as I can tell, is all practical. The snake that came out of Cora Fisher is CG. That is iffy at times, but again, it moves quick and you don't see it for long, so it's okay. And then the Crooked Man looks like all practical as far as I can tell. It's all makeup.
The comic is more gory. Like there's no snake. I think she explodes into like bugs and gore.
Yeah, it's not really even clear that she's dead until you get to the church and he says, she might be a ghost. And then you can see that she's sitting in there. And then he says, okay, she's dead. Because she goes to that other realm.
Yeah, the only thing that's weird is the other BPRD woman is not, I don't think, in the book. I think they added her.
Oh, okay. Well, and what they start doing is they make her a romantic interest, but they do it in a way that I don't mind, where he's clearly protective of her, but, you could just at first chalk that up to, well, he's going to be protective of her because she's an agent and that's his job. Yeah, and then there's a point where the Reverend's like, I see more than you think I do, even though I'm blind. Like, I can tell that he's not just protecting you. He just doesn't know how to tell you that. And so, he says that to her at one point. And then at the very end, she kind of leans on him and he puts his arm around her a little. But that's as far as it goes, which I like. So they play it very
it
low
doesn't
key.
Need to go much further, yeah.
Right. So anyway, they're trapped in the church. And the Crooked Man shows up and the Nympho Witch shows up. And he's saying, hey, let's make a deal. I know your mom's a witch and you're doomed, but I can get you out. And then he summons Hellboy's mother, but of course it's not really her, to say, you don't have to live this life. You could join me, where I am, and we can at least be together, and blah blah blah. And of course he fights it all off, and the dead father gets reanimated at one point, and they have to kill him again. And then there's a point where they take Tom's bone and they draw a cross on what do you call it, a shovel that the Reverend has, and so that becomes kind of their holy shield. And so they make it through the night, and so then the next day, Hellboy's like, all right, he's like, everybody else is going to stay here. Me and Tom are going to go up to the house, because he recognizes that Tom has some kind of power, even though he doesn't want to use the bone. He's like, look, that thing lets you do stuff. You have some type of power with it, so you might as well come help me. And so the two of them go up to the house, and Joe and the Reverend stay behind the church. And Joe's like, well, we got to go help them. And the Reverend's like, well, there's a tunnel that goes underneath the church into the old mine system. And, maybe we can blow something up down there, because he says, well, the mines might be functioning as the kind of circulatory system for the Crooked Man. That's how he's kind of controlling things through the ground, because outside the church,
that immediately sounds like a bad idea. Jesus.
Right. So, and he's like, I'll go down there with you. And that's when he says, I can see more than you think. And then the rest of the movie is pretty much, it's Hellboy and Tom are in the house, and they're getting all these different kind of visions, and they're being, he's trying to trick them and trying to like screw with them and either get them. He wants one of them more or less to join with him to then kill the other. So he's looking to get one of them because he wants to get somebody's soul. He doesn't need both, but he's going to get one of them, and he's trying. And eventually, of course, they resist it. And in the end, and then Joe and the Reverend are in the basement, and they start getting attacked, and the Reverend gets killed trying to help her. And then right about then is when this is all wrapping up, the Crooked Man finally appears because he basically is getting irritated that he can't get them to buy into his stuff. So he's like, fine.
So wait, does the Crooked Man appears, though, at the church, right?
Oh, yeah, no, he shows up. But when they first go in the house, all they're seeing is these apparitions of other things. Like, he's not there.
Got it. Yeah.
And there's finally a point where Hellboy, I think, says something like, hey, chicken shit, why don't you just come out? Because we're not going to buy into your illusions. Like, we're obviously not going to buy it. And so he's like, fine, I'll just come out and I'll take one of you and I don't care who it is. And then Hellboy just starts wailing on him, like just starts beating the shit out of him because he's not immortal, really. He can be injured. And so Hellboy just starts hitting him with his rock hand and then finally knocks him down a flight of stairs, takes out his gun, blows his head off, and his head explodes into all the copper pennies that he had. And basically that's it. He kills him. And Hellboy picks up one of them and says, well, as far as I know, this is yours, Tom. And he gives it to him. And he's like, here's your penny back. Here's your soul back. And so then they're walking back, and he says, Tom, he's like, you don't have to be ruled by this thing. He's like, I don't even know for a fact that bone is what gave you your power. Maybe you just had something in you, and this is what they used to exploit it. So he's like, you don't have to. You're not cursed, is what he's telling him. It's essentially he's saying the same thing about. He's saying you don't have to be trapped into the life that you appear to be trapped in, which of course is what he's saying about himself. So right, you look at him and you think, oh, demon, but he's not a demon. And so he's giving that same speech that you don't have to be stuck with what you think you're stuck with. And so Tom's like, yeah, you're probably right. No, I'll just try to weave my own path. And so he goes off, and Hellboy goes back to the church, finds Joe, and he's like, all right, well, I think we can go find a phone now and call this in. They're walking along the road, and they find a payphone, and they call it in. And then the next thing you see is them in the chopper at the end as they're flying away. And basically she leans up to him, and he kind of puts his arm a little bit around her and smiles a bit. And then you see the chopper going off. And then the last thing you see is that there's a white horse, and on the horse written in blood is "Beware, I am a witch." And what it is they transformed the nympho witch into a horse and left her there. But then they wrote on her in blood, "Beware, I'm a witch." And then the movie ends. And
that's right out of the comic, too.
Yeah. I liked it. I thought it was, again, you can't compare this. As long as you go into this with a clean slate and just understand that it's its own movie and that it's smaller scale, I thought it was a well done. It was certainly better than the last one. Way better. And it's a movie with Mila in it. So if I'm telling you it's way better, it's way better. So I enjoyed it a lot more than the David Harbour one. I felt like I don't remember ever reading this comic, but the fact that you're telling me that it's basically replicating the comic is even more of a verification that I liked it for the right reasons.
I'm going to send you a video. You don't need to listen to it, but if you just kind of skip toward the middle,
this is a comparison you said?
They'll show you panels from the comic.
And this is what you were watching in the background?
This is what I was watching while you were talking, yeah. and I was just using it as a visual aid, and it fucking helped me. And I mean, like, if you go to about, you start at, the 2-minute mark, it'll just start showing. It'll start, if you start, around the 2-minute mark, it'll show you the panels from the comic. And it goes through most of the story.
Okay. And this is, remember when I told you that this reminded me of one of the comics where Mignola didn't do the artwork?
Yeah, he didn't do the art for this.
See, and that's exactly that's the other thing is I think he is credited as one of the writers or something on this. So I think he was directly involved. But yeah, that's the thing is this feels like it is a kind of one of these comics that was done that he didn't illustrate. But yeah, I'm looking at him and this is it. This is basically what you see. Yeah, the Crooked Man, this is all the same stuff.
Yeah,
except, it's not as stylized
ahead,
as this.
It'll show you some of the different, but it shows you all the things you were talking about.
Yeah. No, and that's where she's exploding into. Yeah, and his gun doesn't look as giant as that. And there's the blind preacher. Yep. So it's all the same stuff. Yeah, this is largely. Yeah, there's the nympho witch. Yeah, and she is out there with all the other people, and they're in the church. Yeah, there's the Crooked Man. Yep. No,
it's the comic.
It is the comic, and even the muted colors are all the same. So this is basically they did it correctly. If you can't do a big story, then do a small story and do it well. Honestly, I think most of the negative reviews, and a lot of them refer to the Del Toro films. Well, guess what? I'm sorry. You're going to be let down then. This is not going to be Del Toro. It's not the budget. It's not the same director.
Del Toro is just one version of the.
I know, but you know how people are, and that's why I'm saying, I would throw a lot of those if any of the negative reviews you read refer to the Del Toro film, disregard them, because they're coming from a false equivalency right there. Yeah. You just cannot do that. As its own thing, I would honestly, for a while was like, who could possibly do this after Ron Perlman? And that was even more so after the David Harbour thing. I thought, you know what? Nobody else is going to be able to do it. No, yes, other people can do it. This guy should do a couple more films. They should do another couple of films, single one-off stories like this, and I think it would be very, very successful. I really do. I enjoyed this. It's not a perfect movie. It has little things it does some little things with kind of modern horror that I don't really love, like some of the way they use sound effects. They do some jump scary type of stuff, and they avoid a lot of the problems I have with modern films, but there's still little things here and there. And like I said, the Nympho Witch she feels like somebody who should be on a soap opera, not in a movie like this. Everybody else is good. I think the effects are actually they're better than serviceable, because I think they did a lot of it practically. The Crooked Man looks great. I think as we just looked at the thing comparing it, obviously we're very faithful to the comics, even to the muted color palette. I think that makes Hellboy look even better. I like the performance. I like pretty much everything about it. I thought it was a very effective one-shot film, and I like the fact that it didn't try to tie into bigger cosmic. There is a mention of the old gods at one point, but it's basically like a passing thing where he's like, well, sometimes the old gods get irritated and they do things. But it's not like they ever show up.
Yeah,
you
but
don't have any.
But that's a lot of it. That's the whole Lovecraftian approach to.
Oh yeah, but what I mean is
Hellboy, where they insinuate things, you hear about things,
yes.
But these are smaller stories within that larger context.
Yeah, you never see the Aurora Jihad or whatever it's called. Yeah. You don't. There's never. You don't see a flashback to Rasputin summoning him or the Nazis or any of that. None of that. You only see his mother, and it relates because she's a witch. So it ties into this story. So even that bit of backstory directly relates to what the movie's about. So it makes sense. It's an organic reference to his backstory. And the fact that he and the other main character, which is Tom, really, because Joe is kind of sidelined for a bit of it. She comes and goes. But the two of them have a history with witches. So it makes sense that they would have this kind of overlapping thing happening. So, again, I liked it a lot. I thought it was actually a lot better than I was expecting, because I read so many reviews that said it was bad. And I think those reviews were full of shit for the most part. Again, I won't call it a perfect movie. I don't think it's going to unseat the Del Toro films as far as what many people define Hellboy as.
Yeah, but this is the whole. I love the Del Toro films, but they are not.
This is like Batman. You can have more than one Batman.
You can have,
more than one Hellboy works. But I do like the fact that they did this on a simpler level. That they stripped it back.
I'm actually excited to see this because it is so close to the comic.
And I think the fact that they ditched all the BPRD. They do mention Broom. They reference his name once or twice.
Yeah, but I think so many stories about Hellboy. I mean, there's so many short stories because he goes on his own a lot. They send him out to do shit.
And it makes complete sense for smaller budgets to focus on these smaller scale stories. That's a logical way to keep making them.
He's easier to do than Abe Sapien.
Oh, far easier.
Yeah.
But also, I think they really found a guy who can do the part. They got a really good person with good makeup. That with a slight, I don't know that I would change much of anything about how he looks, even if they got a bigger budget. I wouldn't CG the tail. I would just leave it how they. The only thing they might do is articulate the stone hand better, because they do limit how much you see it. He's really just punching things with it because they probably couldn't really make a good animatronic.
Well, that's kind of what he does in the comic with it. He punches the shit out of stuff.
So again,
it's
not
the
a
cosmic
problem.
fist.
Yes. So honestly, this shows a path forward to make more of these movies. I would hope they would keep doing this. I would have no problem with it.
I don't know if it made enough.
I enjoyed it.
Did it make enough?
Well, I don't know. Yeah, let's see what the budget was. Let's take a look. Because the budget was minuscule as far as I understand. The budget was no, it only made 1.5 on a $20 million budget. So no, that would be considered a failure.
No.
I mean, it only just came out on VOD. It could do better. It got mixed reviews.
According to one of the makeup artists for Hellboy, the Crooked Man, Hellboy was supposed to have his signature yellow eyes, and then they were going to put them in post-production. But they kept them normal.
I'm glad they didn't. I'm really glad they didn't. No, I'm serious. I don't think you need it. Much of this movie showed to me very clearly that you can do a lot without having to do much, which is usually the case. But again, my reference point, like most people, was the Del Toro film. So I'm used to that level of flourish.
The budget was less than that $20 million that they say.
Oh, good. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Well, then maybe it will have a follow-up.
Become a cult
like I said,
favorite.
Most of the response that I've seen, this is by far. I mean, it's not even comparable how much better this is than the last one.
Some of these reviews that were so fierce, it has the look of a YouTube fan film.
Yeah, that's what I'm. Yeah, I mean, that's garbage. That's not true.
Not to mention the excessive fidelity aping the story beats of Mike Mignola. That's interesting. That's a negative thing.
Yeah, see, that's what I'm saying. Is most of these reviews
it follows
are full
the
of shit.
comic too closely, but if the comic is good, I mean,
yeah,
you could say. Couldn't you say the same thing about Sin City?
Right. Yeah,
anyway.
that's to me isn't a review.
Yeah.
I don't even know what that means. Oh, you adapted it too well. Okay, and what? Whereas if you'd veered off and made Hellboy a disco dancer, would that have been better? I mean, if he was wearing hot pants, would that have deviated enough for you? I mean, what does that review even mean? It's stupid.
Yeah, I know.
Like I said, I went into it and I was just hoping it wouldn't be terrible, and instead I was actually impressed because I just said this. Next to the David Harbour one, I'd watch this 100 times again compared to that. Because this feels like exactly what you've demonstrated is they read the comic, understood it, and took it and made a movie out of it. I'm fine with that. I guess if that's your problem, that's your problem. So, like you had pointed out, Del Toro did his own thing with it and just used kind of the visuals and the characters as the basis. Okay, fine. When he gets to make another one, which is never going to happen, then you'll be happy, whoever that person is.
he said he was done,
Yeah, it's never going to happen. So, what do you want? Should they just never make these stories again? Okay, I guess. I like this movie. I'll put it like that. I'm not going to tell you that it's a flawless classic, but it's a hell of a lot better than I think most people would ever have expected it to be. So that's what I would say about it. On that note.
Yeah, and I didn't know that Mike Mignola was not a huge fan of the other ones, apparently.
Yeah, which I still don't. I think there's something behind the scenes on that. I've never really understood that, but I don't care enough to even find out. Whatever. It's not like it's the first time a comic creator didn't like what was done with this stuff in other media. More.
Of course, yes.
Yeah, there's always going to be that tension. But
well, I'm glad it was good. I'm interested to see it.
Yeah. No, I would say it's out for rental now. It's like $14 or something, so it's cheaper than a normal one. But it'll be on streaming very shortly, I'm sure.
Well, support it. Hey, listen, if you want more, support it.
Yeah, I was happy with it, so I was really glad about that. I will probably, I hope it comes out with something that has extras. I'd be really curious how they did some of this stuff.
I mean, we talked so much about the state of the arts and creative in the first part of this show. Listen, if you can support the arts that you like, support them.
Yeah.
So go ahead and buy the movie so that it might make more of them.
Yeah. No, like I said, especially if you were disappointed with the David Harbour one, which I was. I think this is a good example that you don't just keep pouring money into something to try to make it better. Sometimes you go backwards. And you take things down to the bare metal, and you go on the strength of a well-told story. And especially, like I said, if you're into folk horror, this is way more that than the big cosmic stuff. They make mention of those things, but this feels like a kind of Appalachian haunting. And I like that stuff because I've seen a lot of it now from the international stuff I've watched, and I like it. It's a different type of horror, certainly, but I think it's every bit as good, and I think this is a good example of an American version of that, which normally I would say international is better. But this demonstrates that, if you take a good foundational story, you can make American folk horror, and it doesn't have to be over-reliant on found footage or lots of jump scares or a stupid gimmick. You can just make a simple story and tell it well. So I would recommend it. I think it's good, especially as we're in the Halloween month. So anyway, now that we're 2 minutes short of 3 hours, I'm going to say thank you very much for sticking with us all the way through. And enjoy your weekend, and we'll talk to you again next week. Visit OzoneNightmare.com to subscribe to new episodes, browse through our back catalog, or to find links to support the show. Follow @OzoneNightmare on Twitter for the latest episode postings and other show information. If 280 characters just isn't enough, you can always email us, theozonenightmare@gmail.com. The opening theme for the show is provided by Heartbeat Hero. The closing theme is provided by Ogre. Please visit and support these artists using the links in the show notes for each episode.